So is your budget.
Let's look here. Quinn Ewers trying to audible.
To stay alive. Can they hook 'em? Touchdown, Matthew Golden.
365 Sports is also brought to you by Texas Farm Bureau Insurance, protecting Texans since 1952.
Jaden Harrison bringing back the kickoff. He brought two back for touchdowns last year when he played for the Thundering Herd of Marshall, and he has one for Notre Dame.
365 Sports is turbocharged by Unite Private Networks. Find out more at uniteprivatenetworks.com.
Golden with a chance as a return man to set up Texas in good field position as he returns it from the 25. And he breaks through. Look at Silas Bolden. Goodbye.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you might be as you watch us, as we have some of you who watch from different parts of the world, different countries, and we always sometimes want to make sure we recognize that, from Germany, from Japan, and other places around the world. But we are live in the middle of Texas. 365 Sports, Craig Smoak and Paul Catalina. I'm David Smoak, and Garrett Ross, Emery Winter in the studio. And oh my, I have not jumped in the chat yet. I don't know if Charisse is in it. I have a feeling she is, the Ohio State fan that was on her own island throughout last week, with a couple of others that joined the way as they beat Texas on a dramatic goal line stand to win the game to now play Notre Dame a week from tonight for the national championship. We have a lot to get to. Mike McCarthy is out as Cowboys head coach, and the college football championship game is set. We can get kind of crazy if we try to do too much at once, so we're going to try to piece a little bit together and discuss a little bit about that game on Friday night, and we'll do that with its own separate segment, but also discuss it a little bit here. But let's start with this. Ohio State right now, Paul, Craig, a 9.5-point favorite against Notre Dame a week from tonight to win their first national title since 14. If Notre Dame does, Lou Holtz and the Irish won it back in 1988.
Yeah, I think that is, in my personal opinion, the way that Notre Dame plays. 9.5 is a big number, but I totally understand why Ohio State's getting it. They beat Texas by 14. They've beaten everybody. They're just beating everybody by 2 scores. So why not give them a 9.5 point favorite, which is, I'm sure, going to move in the next 10 days or so. But the bottom line is Ohio State's playing great right now. So is Notre Dame. But I think Notre Dame's got a bit of a team of destiny vibe about them, which
maybe 86
okay.
Penn State when they beat Miami.
Okay, I'll tell you who they kind of remind me of a little bit. Maybe not as overall athletic as this team, but 2000 Oklahoma.
Yep.
If you go back to that season, because Josh Heupel was nothing special as a quarterback. He was just effective and good. Riley Leonard's a more athletic version of, I don't know how he keeps doing this. Josh Heupel was that all year long for them, and they just made plays when they needed to. Oklahoma that year in 2000, and sure, Craig remembers this, they were dead to rights in several games, 5 times in these games. There's probably 40 moments in that year that all went their way because they just had something to them, and Notre Dame reminds me of that, where Penn State had a chance to kind of put them out of the game, and Notre Dame wouldn't let them. Oklahoma in 2000 was exactly like that.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame's a nice story, and they've been a fun team to follow. I think they're a great example of why the old way of thinking in college football, it was time for it to die out with the new era of college football. And what I mean by that is, in watching Notre Dame advance this national championship game and watch what they've done over the last 3 weeks to earn their spot, you can't say they haven't earned their spot in the national championship game. You can absolutely not say that. What you can do is what many people have attempted to do, be like, well, what about Northern Illinois? So are we trying to crown the best champion, or are we trying to crown who just wiggled their way through the season and was able to escape landmines? Because last time I saw, that was a problem with teams like SMU whose schedule was too easy. So which way do you want it? Do you want the teams who have the nice, clean, regular season record, or do you want the team that actually has gone out and proven it and done it against the best of the best, that all earned their way there as well. And Notre Dame and Ohio State have both done that. I think it's setting up for a great showdown. And I definitely saw some of the comments about, well, this stinks. And look, we have to be careful, like everybody with every topic, every time we go, like, well, there's people saying, it's like, who are these people? A random guy on Twitter, right? Who may or may not even be serious. So it's not like the whole world's thinking this way. I think most people believe that these teams have earned their way, but I did see a couple of comments who could just be completely random and unpopular opinions, but about how it's just different now, how the regular season doesn't matter as much. And I was sitting here going, these two teams are the best two teams standing at the end of the season who have absolutely done everything in their power to earn their way here over the last month. I love it. I think it's going to set up for a great national championship winner. I don't know how entertaining the game's going to be because Ohio State is playing the way that they are, but you cannot say these two teams haven't earned it, and you can't say they're not the two best as of right now based on everything that we've seen. So, yeah, it's different than what I grew up with, but please give me the team that's gone and beaten like three playoff teams in a row and done it at neutral sites, done it at home, versus, well, they didn't deserve a shot to get here because they lost to Northern Illinois early in the season.
No,
give me this
long gone,
10 times out of 10. This is way better in crowning a national champion, in my opinion, so I'm fired up for it, and I understand the spread. I mean, looking at Ohio State, it's easy to understand that spread, and I did not think it was going to be them just dominating Texas, but the way that game started out, that's what it looked like it was about to be, and Texas, to their credit, I know we're going to talk about that, stayed in the fight, but that could have been what a lot of people were talking about last week with the big, overwhelming Ohio State win.
Well,
so, they're cooking, and it's not a surprise to see them as heavy favorites for the Natty.
They hurt themselves, and what kept that game tight in the first half were dumb penalties. Henderson, who then made up for it with that play at the end of the first half. A couple of other things. Texas, then, of course, at the 1-yard line. It's something about the 1-yard line at AT&T Stadium. Remember the Big 12 championship game between Baylor and Oklahoma State? In this case, it's to play for a national championship, and an unbelievable play by Ohio State in the end. We'll get to players that are already turning pro from Texas and anyone else. A couple of coaching notes. Baylor has filled one of their coaching staff spots, and there's other particular notes in college football. Here was Stuart Mandel on how popular this game is going to be. Per ticket _IQ, the most expensive national championship ticket since they started tracking it back in 2011. The current average is $4,000. Now, that means some might be for $2,200 and some might be for $6,000, whatever it might be. You have two huge fan bases. Notre Dame in their history, although it's been kind of hit and miss for quite some time. In Ohio State, of course, they bring a bunch to the table. So we will kind of monitor that as the next few days go by.
Would you like to know another reason why these games will all go to campus, except once they can beat the Bulls back and move on from that, they'll go to campus because of that number. Because of his national championship for 4,000 on the neutral site, if you just fraction that off and know that you're not going to have unsold tickets for, Texas, Arizona State, if that game is in Tempe or in like you did when it was in Atlanta, right? You're not going to have unsold tickets for this one because it's the national championship game in Atlanta, but you know that, okay, well, if the average is 4,000, if we get to the average of like 900 or 1,000 on our campus, that's a boon for everybody involved in games that we normally wouldn't have. So that's one of the reasons it'll go back. I'm sure that number will fluctuate a little bit, but $4,000 on average is insane.
Yeah, that's just today. Sometimes you might see it go up. Sometimes it eventually levels off, and a lot of times there's some mind games being done by those who have tickets or they don't. All right. Anthony Knapp, offensive tackle for Notre Dame, out. He is out with a high ankle sprain. That's one of the players that was confirmed yesterday by Marcus Freeman. We'll hear from Freeman and Ryan Day in just a little bit. And then, of course, they talked about the possibility as an option at left tackle. Notre Dame has had their injuries. Ohio State has fought through some injuries, and they play each other 1 week from tonight. How about this? And I think this is because of what the SEC likes to say, and they have been amazing for nearly 2 consecutive decades, but this year, not so much. They were good, but they didn't seem to have a team that was possibly great. Texas flirted with that. We didn't know about a couple of others. First time since that USC back-to-back and then lost to Texas in 2005, not a team from the SEC in the national championship game for consecutive years. Now, that's a ridiculous streak. That's how good they have been. And they've won a bunch of those since that time. But first time, it's amazing that this year, when there was we should have more, we should have this, we, and I understand what Sankey's doing, but for back-to-back years, no SEC team in the championship game.
Yeah, bummer. Parity. That's just how it's going to be. Look, you give more teams more games, there's more chance to lose, which is why a lot of people didn't want this thing to expand all that much, because they know if you have more chances to win, that also means that you have more chances to lose. So that 50-50 makes it scary. It makes it harder to push your narrative of nobody else is on our level. Well, most people are. And look, the brands are going to be the brands, but I think it's great. And I think even though it's going to be brands, look, we're going to see most of the teams we see in this final game are going to be teams that you've seen in the final game before. There's 15 to 20 that will find their way in more regularly than the rest of the.
I don't even think it's that big of a number.
Yeah, I'm expanding that just because I think parity will have an effect on that, but you'll see teams that are more familiar with it than not. But you'll also occasionally see a team, just compare it to basketball, like Baylor, who has the perfect team and hauls off and wins it. You'll see that happen, but it won't happen a lot. But
I don't think that happens maybe ever in football unless you've got a team who's got Texas Tech oil money and decides we're going to go spend $500 million on a roster, basically. I think beyond that, to go the lengths of having to win 3-4 playoff games is going to be really difficult for most any teams not named Notre Dame, Ohio State. Just reel out the top 10 all-time blue bloods, and those will be the teams most well-equipped to do that. And you know what? Because it's just pay to play, maybe a rich oil alum at Texas Tech or someplace somewhere else, some software guy does decide, you know what, we're going all in at Michigan State and we're going to go win a title. Maybe that happens, but just consistently I have a hard time seeing most programs being able to really, truly go deep and compete in this tournament that aren't a very select few. And they're in this Final Four, or were, and 2 of them are still standing, obviously, in 2 of the biggest in Notre Dame and Ohio State. Here's my thing. I think there's a lot to unpack with the whole SEC angle because that was very popular to talk about and parrot after the game. And look, nobody enjoys a nice pushback on Greg Sankey more than this guy. But at the same time, I think the anti-SEC can kind of swing too much the other way sometimes. And I'm having a hard time personally finding the right balance because I do think it's fair to throw some dirt on them. Because of all the talking over the past 2 decades, the humbling that was needed for a lot of their fans, and quite frankly, their commissioner. But at the same time, is it the end of the conference? Are they, is it the doomsday scenario? No, I don't feel that way. I still feel like we're going to watch Alabama and Georgia and probably Texas at some point break through and win national titles in the coming years. But there is a very interesting sort of thing being developed here when it comes to the whole North is rising now, right? You heard a lot about the North and the South over the weekend like it was a civil war or something. Well, you kind of see that line drawn via NIL and just the changes to the sport and how that actually greatly benefits your Ohio States, your Michigans, your Notre Dames, not even taking into account the Notre Dame TV money that the Notre Dame TV money they get on their own, but also the playoff money they're getting on their own. So there has been a little bit of a balance and a power shift more north, and I just am curious if this is a long, sustaining thing or if this is just kind of a blip on the radar for the SEC. I do know it's created a little bit of a panic. I do know it's created a little bit of a what's going on here for the Paul Feinbaums and the whoever else you want to fill out that list of the world. They're a little bit concerned about what's going on the last couple of years, guys, and I find that very interesting and also a very nice wrinkle to what we've been watching over the past several years. So I'm not sure if this is the start of the Big Ten winning 5 championships in a row or winning 18 out of the next 20. I highly doubt that. But I do know if there are any schools that could benefit even more greatly than the SEC schools could benefit from all that happened, it was gigantic powers with the biggest fan bases possible in teams like Michigan, teams like Ohio State, teams like Notre Dame. And so it is very interesting to see kind of this shift going on, whether it's temporary or not. I totally understand everybody getting their shots in, especially when the conversation about 3 weeks ago was how they got screwed. Bama deserved to be in. South Carolina deserves to be in. Ole Miss deserves to be in. And they're not going to make it to the championship game. So very interesting how that all, transpired. And most of all, I guess my biggest takeaway from this that I do know for sure is that I'm glad that's why they play the freaking games and we don't play the what-if game every year. I'd much rather have the expanded playoff and actually see who does get there rather than saying, oh, well, they deserve it because, that logo on their chest. Yeah. You actually have to go play it on the field, and that's what happened, and maybe that's part of the reason why it's shifting a little bit.
And a lot of reasons, and no matter, he would not admit this, but I think we even discussed this, and I want to get to a lot more, but it's the national championship game. It's independent Notre Dame against the Big Ten's Ohio State after the Big Ten's Michigan won it a year ago. Is that the more teams you get in among the 12, well, the more opportunities you're still going to just landslide and just shove your way to a championship. And that's also one of the reasons. I never really heard Petiti ever say much about that. I never really heard him with too many of those quotes. Sankey was very brash, arrogant at times, hell of a commissioner, does what he's supposed to do, but I haven't seen much from him. Maybe when they start talking about making changes, he'll be front and center. You mentioned the North.
Well, I would say with Petiti, he got Indiana in, he got Ohio State in, and he got Oregon in, so he didn't really – and Penn State in.
Ohio State.
Yes.
You
so he got like 4 teams in there. I think
but you never really heard him.
Yeah, you know why? That's where we like him better. He just let it fall where it may, and then he can be like, look, I don't have to say anything. I don't have to go around on every television network and take a dump down the ACC and Big 12's throats because I want to pretend like I'm better than them. Like, that's the thing. That's the thing. If Greg Sankey did everything else almost exactly the same and stopped that part of it, I would get it. Like, okay, you're supposed to advocate for the SEC, but doing so at the absence of truth is where it gets me mad. Yeah. Because that's where it's meant. Tony Petiti just like, all right, look, we had 4 teams
in.
He
always said that we're talking about it, I don't believe. I think he also believes the same theory. He just didn't say, hey, we are bigger, better, faster, stronger. Everybody knows that those 2 conferences. Well, Notre Dame is in. Ohio State is in. We're going to have some former players. Last time, Northern schools won back-to-back college football championships. This is exciting for me and yet also sad. That was 30 years ago. Is that right?
Yep.
Nebraska's dominant run in 94, 95. They also won it in 97. The last time 2 different Northern schools won consecutive national titles was 1976, Pittsburgh, Tony Dorsett and company, and 1977 Notre Dame with what they had, the Browner brothers and Montana. Was it Montana? I think it may not have been Montana. And they beat Earl Campbell and Texas in the Cotton Bowl 38-10 in a dominant win that year.
Yeah. Would Nebraska be a northern team or a Midwestern team?
I think they're Midwestern.
Yeah,
I think they're Midwestern.
But I mean, they're northern, they're northern
south. How about
they're the south?
They're north of Mason-Dixon, though, right?
Yeah. Yes, they are. They are north of the Mason-Dixon line. And yeah, I mean, again, you expand the thing out, like you're going to get more people. And look, Ohio State's been knocking on this door for a long time. Anyway, eventually they were going to be in the championship game again. So I think the bigger surprise is that Notre Dame navigated through this without, the last time they got in, it was just 2 teams, right? So that they made it through all that with and getting in. I think it's the bigger surprise about that. And the Northern thing now, especially with the way that recruiting is, I think that's kind of going away because most of your brands recruit nationally anyway. And you look at Ohio State, their best receiver is from Florida. Quinshawn Judkins is from Louisiana. You can go on down. Like they're recruiting the South really well. Jaden Greathouse is from Austin. Riley Leonard's from Fairhope, Alabama. So they kind of have national recruiting bases anyway.
Well, yeah, they do. But there's still, we understand the talent and how much of it is in the South, Southeast. But you never know when one of these things might flip. The SEC might win 7 straight after this. Well, that remains to be seen.
Yeah, I think it's a very small sample size to react too much to it, but I do think it's enough of a sample that we haven't had in a really long time for people who've been waiting for a blip in the action that was kind of consistently just all focused on one area of the country, for that to shift, for that to get changed up. And so right now is that time, and it may be fleeting. It may just be these couple of years, and the next year Alabama's back and Georgia's back and Texas is back and so on and so forth. But maybe not. Maybe this is just the start of a new trend, because things come and go. And the SEC has dominated for 20 years. The passion's not going to get any smaller. The fan bases aren't going to get any smaller. The money's not going to get any smaller. The TV interest isn't going to get any smaller. So they're not going anywhere. But, there's a lot of conversations, and you're repeating some of the points, both of you, from like stuff I saw over the weekend about the northern schools and this and that. But it is a different world of college football from when their streak started in the early 2000s. The expanded playoff does matter, because Notre Dame – probably not in this thing, right? Like Ohio State's not even in this thing in the 14 playoffs. So, just the fact that these teams have a shot, and it's not just who was like basically sitting there with only 2 blemishes at the end of the year. Now it's like you can have 1 or 2, but you still have to earn your way here. Like there is something to be said about that, and that not just, well, they've got this many top 25 wins. They deserve it. Like, you actually have to go out and play the game, and that's what's been fascinating about this year is I don't think most people would have predicted Notre Dame, Ohio State. Ohio State, yes, Notre Dame, not so much. But when you started the playoff, I don't think you would have predicted a couple years go by with no SEC team in the championship game. But here we are. So, yeah, it's interesting to talk about. It's interesting to theorize on whether this is the start of something or it is just a blip on the radar. But it is a refreshing it's a breath of fresh air, I think, for a lot of college football fans who have been kind of sick and tired of the over-the-top kind of beating of the head of the SEC dominance. And so if you were getting fed up with that or annoyed by that, like this is the best thing in the world, because now you can watch the national championship game and not be worried about yet another title going to the Southeast. But I do think that can get overplayed a bit. I also don't understand why. Like, you've only had so many moments to really be able to pick at those folks and point and go, ha, see? And this is one of those very few moments right now.
That's why they play the games. The hypothetical champion could be somebody you want it to be, like Lane Kiffin or Ole Miss or someone like that. By the way, I just made a joke. I'll make a joke in above the northern line. That's Nebraska has not been above 500 since 2016. So, but the Mason-Dixon, a lot of you are talking about, even Ohio State, Michigan, you can think are Midwestern-type powers, but that's another story. By the way, Notre Dame's All-American safety Xavier Watches from Omaha, and he's a phenomenal player. I remember that recruitment. That was never a decision to make. He was going to go to Notre Dame, as he should have at that particular time. So, how about this picture of 3 Notre Dame legends? Heisman Trophy winner Tim Brown on the left, Joe Theismann in the middle, and Jerome Betts on the right-hand side. Theismann is going to join us on Thursday. What?
Said Bettis, right?
Jerome Bettis.
I thought you said Betts.
No,
Okay.
Jerome Bettis. Joe Theismann will join us. He's been with us a lot during the Super Bowl coverage. He will join us on Thursday in our show during our show on 365 Sports. There's been some talk about Marcus Freeman, and we'll get to Mike McCarthy. We'll have a guest on that and get into that a little bit, because we understand how big a story that is, and Jerry loves it that way. But Marcus Freeman, there's been interest or not interest. I don't see him leaving. I'm not saying the NFL's not powerful, but I think Marcus Freeman just signed, did he not, a new contract, and I think he's fine. And even he said something on January 4th about something was going to be released, but that is something to at least bring up, because it's that feeding frenzy time.
Look, if he hauls off and wins this thing next week, look, Alexander saw the the breadth of his empire and weapon, because there's no more worlds left to conquer. I mean, if you win the national championship in Notre Dame, I mean, maybe you do want to run it back, or maybe you do want to go to the Bears and coach them. I don't know. If they call, he probably listens. And look, part of that is also his agent, floating out that, like, yeah, we've had NFL interest in, that they'd like to talk to him. And then if he says no, they can go back and we can forget about it. But if I was anybody in the NFL, the Bears, the Cowboys, anyone, I'd be at least intrigued to talk to Marcus Freeman because he's a young coach on the way up.
Yeah, I mean, to not keep it so vague, the Bears are the team that were mentioned for Marcus Freeman. As you said, the Bears are the team that were connected with the report over the weekend and being interested in talking to him. So he's a Ohio State guy. It's not like Notre Dame's his tried and true, and he can never leave South Bend. He could go anywhere. He's a young guy. I don't think he has to jump to the NFL right now. I don't think he needs to let this be a distraction anyway, and I'm sure that he won't, but I can totally understand teams be interested. Hell, if you're interested in talking to Matt Campbell, why would you not be interested in talking to Marcus Freeman?
Yeah.
Okay. So, I'm sure they're interested in talking to a lot of people, and Marcus Freeman is going to be some guy that I think a lot of teams, not just this year, but in the coming years, will be very interested in talking to. Now, I have zero clue about any of his NFL aspirations, if there are any to begin with, but it's totally understandable why he'd be talked about, especially when other names like a Matt Campbell, for example, are getting that same type of attention or at least interview opportunity. So, why would you not look at this young, smart, successful head coach and think, hey, what could he do for my franchise potentially? So, I don't think that's going to go anywhere. But, I have, again, zero clue about what his motivations are in terms of his goals for the future. So I don't feel comfortable saying one way or the other, like, no way he'd ever go to the NFL and leave Notre Dame right now. Maybe he would if they won the national title. Maybe that's like his grand plan. I have no idea, but I definitely understand the interest in the Cowboys now opening up adds another team to the mix. So for any college coaches, whether it be a Campbell or a Freeman or whoever else has been talked about, there's another job that potentially gets more rumors circulating.
Steve, and among others, you're talking about Joe Theismann. His name originally was Theismann. Yes, they changed it to Heisman, but it's Joe Theismann. That's his official name as of, in fact, a long time ago.
It's like Tony Dorsett's name is Dorsett, not Dorset, like it actually was.
If you see Joe and you yell at Joe Theismann, he may laugh, but
we're going to see him Thursday.
He's Joe Theismann, and that name has made him a great deal of money.
Yep.
So he's not embarrassed about the Theismann thing.
Theismann sounds better.
Yeah. No, it really, to me, it's a lot easier to say. Turning pro, and there will be many more. These are the players, 3 players late yesterday afternoon, evening, declaring that they will enter the NFL draft. Kelvin Banks, what an unbelievable career. And I saw this was his note that he's turning pro. He should. He's unbelievable. Won basically every award. UT has an amazing history of offensive linemen, and he's among the best that's ever played that position. And I'm not trying to over-exaggerate there.
Well, look, he's not. And if you want to know the biggest reason that they're finally paying off on their hype, which I know they got to the semifinals. That's paying off on the hype, just not all the way. It's because for a long time, a very long time, that position was...
Yeah, it was hit and miss. Yeah.
It was not, outside of maybe 2 dudes, Sam Williams and Cosme, in the between Mac Brown and Sarkisian times.
Connor Williams?
Connor Williams. Yeah. But... Like 3 guys, you're talking about probably 45 starting offensive linemen that were 4- and 5-star recruits at the University of Texas that went nowhere. And now Steve Sarkisian's got 2 guys on that line for sure. They're going to be first-round draft picks, and another one's probably a second.
Majors at some point whenever he decides to make that decision. Here's another player, Hayden Connor. This is Jaden Blue. The running back who caught the touchdowns in that game against Ohio State, a fantastic. Hayden Connor, who I mentioned, and then we had up Jaden Blue. Hayden Connor, another offensive lineman. What's going on, Garrett? Just leave. That's Jaden Blue. Yeah. A very, very big play receiver, had huge plays in the playoffs in throughout the year. Traded a lot of that time with Quintravian Wisener, but he's turning pro. So Banks, Hayden Connor, and Jaden Blue. Still have not seen anything official yet.
Okay, I'll tell you who is
with Quinn Ewers,
who is declared confirmed according to On Texas Football. Quinn Ewers, Calvin Banks, Hayden Connor, Jaden Blue, Matthew Golden, Gavin Holmes, Andrew Makuba, and Vernon Broughton.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, well, I haven't seen all those other announcements, or they're just not making them official just yet. So all those make sense. I don't think there's really any surprises there. Jaden Blue had a fantastic year with both his rushing, receiving combined. And obviously the linemen have been doing their thing for a while now. Some of those guys that, if y'all remember back when Texas became one of the first schools to start basically doing pay-for-play. Remember the whole $50,000 for offensive linemen thing from a few years ago?
Yeah, they took advantage of it the first year was available.
Yeah, and then Tech did something similar right around that time. But, I mean, like, there's been all sorts of little chapters of NIL, but I remember that with Texas, and I remember that with some of those guys now that are going to be heading to the NFL. So that worked out for both sides very well. Won a lot of games, and now they're going where they wanted to go all along, which is to the pros to make a lot of money. And, yeah, those three will definitely hear their names called. I think Blue's a guy who, you know, kind of on paper was always like ideally the 3 years, and he's gone an NFL running back prospect. So, you know, I think this is all kind of worked out how you hope talent-wise, and the rest of that list that I guess hasn't become official, Makuba and Ewers and all that, yeah, all those names make sense. I mean, there's going to be a big exodus, and they'll have guys that slide in, and I don't know if they'll, you know, reach the same level right away, but I don't worry too much about the talent exodus at Texas. And they've really now started a huge wave of momentum when it comes to the draft, because they were a laughingstock there for a couple years. You know, the first year where they didn't have anybody drafted at all was kind of one of the signs of like, man, this program is not where it needs to be. And then it happened again a little while after that, but that's not going to happen with Sarkisian at the helm for the foreseeable future. I mean, that time period that we lived through where there was a couple of drafts of no guys getting picked, I don't know if we'll ever see that again, honestly, because of just the way the whole sport is set up now. They should never, ever suffer from something like that again under any circumstances. So, yeah, they're going to have their 10, 11 guys that probably get drafted again this year. Like they had a bulk of them last year. They're going to be right there in the running with Alabama and Georgia, probably year in and year out for a solid number of draft picks. But, you know, as much as they've been knocking on the door, like you can't guarantee that just continues to happen of like, well, we've been in the semifinal twice, like now we'll break through this next time. It's like, you hope so. And you know that the talent faucet's not going to get turned off. But man, you've been so close, and you just wonder if they will be able to break through. But yeah, they should not have any problems when it comes to talent. And I think Ewers and his decision, to me, going to the NFL seems like the right call. Although, you know, Ohio State could use a quarterback, but he's, I think, about tapped out his resources, and I don't see a spot where he'd go. He could do something that he hasn't done at Texas. Like, there's no place he's going to go where he's going to go win the national championship now, like barring Ohio State or something. And so I think that he's about done what he can do. It's an awful way for your career to end, how it ended for him. But I do think the right call is probably going in this draft, especially when there's not a whole lot of quarterback competition to be had in this particular draft. So I think that should serve him well also.
All right. There's a couple of other stories. We will today hear from a guy who played at Colorado back in the days when Bill McCartney, the Colorado coach who won a national championship, and kind of go over his career. That happened over the weekend. We're going to hear from Matt Russell, a phenomenal player, one of the leaders of those Colorado teams. He's going to join us here in the next segment. We will also today hear from two analysts who cover, one, Dan Hope, Ohio State, and number two, Notre Dame, along with today getting into more depth of the Mike McCarthy decision, firing, and all of that with the Cowboys. It just kind of seemed like that dragged on. Tomorrow at midnight would have been his last day to be under contract with the Cowboys. Paul's Top 5 will also hear from both Marcus Freeman and Ryan Day with a media session yesterday when it comes to the national championship playoff game. Baylor has taken Paul Gonzalez, a longtime assistant coach at TCU when Gary Patterson was there, and then obviously now with Sonny Dykes. He becomes their new outside linebackers coach, secondary coach. They will still, and that could be imminent, their outside linebackers coach, because they're targeting Carson Hall, who is the outside linebackers coach at Western Kentucky. Also has worked at Georgia.
I'm way more familiar with Gonzalez, although not that much as I am with Carson Hall. But I look forward to seeing how they fit into the staff. The only time, sometimes I think people don't position coaches are so hard to grade. Like I said last week when we were talking about Penn State, if I was going to change one thing, I would change wide receiver coach because it's like a year-over-year thing they haven't been good at. If I was going to change something about Baylor, it would have been the cornerbacks coach because the last few years they just haven't been good. So those are the things I think you change. I think getting Paul Gonzalez, though, is a nice chance to shake things up a little bit.
I mean, yeah, I think they definitely needed to shake things up. That's why they moved away from Kevin Curtis. And so they were on the hunt. We knew that. Didn't have any idea where they would look. But to look to Fort Worth is very interesting, although not all that surprising because you know your enemies as well as you know probably anybody. And also the fact that Gary Patterson was helping you out. I'm sure you probably kicked the tires and asked him his thoughts on Paul Gonzalez if he didn't mention it himself at some point in time. I don't know. But I don't think it's too crazy that that's who they landed on. The only crazy part about it is just simply that it's from a rival, and we just don't see something like that happen all the time. And to be specific, he's not a secondary coach. He is the cornerbacks coach. They have Matt Powledge as the safeties coach. So, yeah, he'll also be, a passing game coordinator as well, but long, storied career at TCU where he seemed to do a great job in their secondary. It was always pretty stout. So I think on paper it looks like a nice ad for Dave Aranda and this defense, which definitely needs to improve on that back end. So excited to see what he can do with the talent that they have and the guys they're bringing in. And hopefully he can get them to the level they were playing at in Fort Worth because they usually had a pretty good secondary and pretty good corners.
Well, one more note on college football, possible coaching switches as far as assistants, coordinators. Clemson, talking to Penn State defensive coordinator Tom Allen, a top target for Clemson and Dabo Swinney. And so there's that one there. Obviously, Penn State just wrapped up their semifinal with the loss to Notre Dame.
This is
he was at Indiana, right?
Yeah, he was head coach in Indiana. That's quite an impressive. He went outside the box to go get Garrett Riley, and he got Garrett Riley from a team that just played in the national championship game. But Clemson poaching a TCU coach is not as much as climbing up into the Big Ten and poaching a Big Ten coach, a Penn State coach at that. So. Yeah, I think, he's added transfers. He's gone and changed up his defensive coordinator and is likely going to add Tom Allen, or it looks like that's where he's fishing. If Tom Allen decides to stay at Penn State, then he's got to go back to the drawing board. But the fact that he's doing it and breaking outside of his tree and his comfort zone shows Dabo's trying to adapt. And for someone who has criticized everything that he's done for the last few years, I mean, more power to him for adapting. I still don't like his personality, but at least he's adapting.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like Cignetti's personality all the time either, but if you get me in the playoff, then what the hell? Win national championships even better, and Dabo's done all that, and the amount of reporting on this would indicate that barring a solar storm of some sort knocking us off our axis, he's going to be the defensive coordinator. I mean, all signs are pointing to that. So, yeah, it's not official yet, but it's pretty much as official as it can get. So, a nice coup for Dabo and company and a little bit of a stunner, I would say, for Penn State based on the reaction that I've seen. Mm-hmm. That's a great get for the Tigers. And Dabo, maybe a new chapter for him in terms of starting to dabble in the portal. And now you change up the defense a little bit. And, Cade Klubnik coming back. We'll see where that takes them next year. But that's definitely a team that's become a lot more interesting in the offseason, this very short offseason. That's still not really the offseason because there's still games being played. But, yeah, Clemson's a team that's not sitting on their hands or just decaying and withering away. They're making changes and they're upgrading, and that's good to see because for a while there you kind of wondered where this ship was floating.
Matt Russell played at Colorado, played for Bill McCartney, who passed away over the weekend, part of an NFL executive administration with the Eagles. He will discuss Bill McCartney, the impact he had on not just the football team, but on many people. He's next. This is 365 Sports. Petty Clinic, lowt.com. Dr. Kent Petty can help you become the high-performance man you want to be, need to be, and used to be. Dr. Petty can help you by doing this. You contact him. You can call them, you can email them, but go to the website, pettycliniclowt.com, contact them, and they will kind of go back and forth, get some information from you. If you have been lethargic, you're not sleeping as well, you have sex drive issues or ED, all of that could be your testosterone level has dropped as you've gotten older, especially when you get to your upper 30s. And then in of course, after that, 1 out of every 3 or 4 men have symptomatic issues of low testosterone. Maybe it's you. Dr. Petty and his staff will help set you up to get your blood work, take care of that, get the results, and get in contact with you. Maybe everything's good, but if it's not, he can give you an option so you can become the high-performance man you want to be, need to be, used to be at pettycliniclowt.com.
It's time to start something new at Allen Samuels. Drive into 2025 with huge savings on all of our Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram vehicles, from a trail-conquering Jeep Grand Cherokee, towing in style with a Ram Heavy Duty, or cruising the city in a sporty and luxurious Ram 1500, we've got the perfect ride for you. Stop by Allen Samuels in Waco, where we make car buying easy.
Come by, let's be friends.
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow at GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
If you want quality and personalized service for all your air conditioning and heating needs, call Tradesman Services. They're a family-owned and operated company that has served Texans for over 30 years. Tradesman offers maintenance plans starting at just $12 per month and a free service call for all new customers. They're also experts in geothermal design, installation, and service. Visit them online at coolingwaco.com.
I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live. Forever we'll be singing like, oh, I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. I'll never get used to this. This is how I wanna live. Forever we'll be singing like, oh, I'll never get used to this.
This is 365 Sports.
The 3 o'clock hour is sponsored by Waco Custom Marketplace. Meats, sweets, Texas treats, and a cut above the rest. 425 Lake Air Drive, Waco.
Matt Russell played his college football at Colorado back in the mid-90s and played for Bill McCartney, who passed away over the weekend, who had an unbelievable impact on not just the football program, but coaches all over the country and many people. He joins us. Matt, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it. I don't know if was Bill in bad shape or health or whatever, but when you heard that he was gone, what was your initial reaction?
I think probably my initial reaction was more reflection than anything. I'm here in the area in Denver and have spent time with Mac, since I got done playing, here and there, would see him every other year, maybe every year. And so anyway, upsetting, sad, tragic for all of us who have played for him. But I think at the same time, we knew that was maybe the direction that it was heading over the years. And so certainly reflection over my career and the impact he had on me and all of my teammates.
Matt, obviously, there's different eras of college football. Do you feel he kind of unfairly gets kind of forgotten because of what he was able to do at Colorado and how dominant you guys were? And that I really do think that especially 1990. People forget about that year quite a bit.
Yeah, it's funny you brought that up because I was thinking about that before I came on here with you guys. In '94 when he left, for those of us that knew him and the relationship that he had with Lindy, his wife, his family, the importance of them, it wasn't as big a shock, I think, once it kind of soaked in, especially at that age. Our coach left and it was pretty big shock. We didn't see it coming. His reasoning certainly didn't surprise us given the kind of man that he is. But I do think back, you think of some of the names, the Bobby Bowdens and Tom Osborne, and the list goes on. Bo Schembechler, who he worked for, which is where we got him from, was there in Ann Arbor. But you think of those guys, and he certainly goes down in history in my mind and our teammates' minds is one of those guys. And I think had he stuck around, you could argue he was in the prime of his career when he stepped away from the game. So I do see your point there and have thought a lot about that.
We've had Gary Barnett on, who does radio, as you know, for Colorado, and what he did that 2001 season when they physically annihilated Nebraska and kind of changed the tune. I think that gets more attention than what Bill did. When he came in, Colorado was struggling. It took a while in the Big 8 when it was Oklahoma and Nebraska, 1-2 almost every year, and then became a part of that. What about him as a coach? Was it his ability for people to rise to the occasion? Was his motivation? Was his X's and O's recruiting? What was his main, you could say, character that led him to what he did?
Well, I think when you talk to a guy in my era, my freshman year was '92, and I find myself when I'm talking to Hagan, Alfred Williams, Bieniemy, Canavis, Deion Figures, the guys that were before us, feel a debt of gratitude to those guys, because to answer your question, what Mac did that was special, I believe, was he was an unbelievable recruiter, and he could connect with kids from every walk of life. And he did. He inherited a program that was really struggling. I think at the time, Colorado football was probably about as bad as it could get. And he came and he recruited. He made a believer of a lot of those guys. And I tell my kids, which they had a hard time believing, 10, 15 years ago, that when I came out of high school, every kid in the country wanted to go to Colorado. And he did that because those guys before us took a leap of faith in what Coach McCartney was telling them, that, hey, we're building something special here. So, those guys before us, took that jump. And certainly the guys in the mid-'80s that set the stage. And then from there, Mac just recruited, went out, scoured the country, and got the best talent and really had it going.
You don't see a lot of coaches retire at 54 anymore. You mentioned how that's a young man, especially in the coaching game. When you've got like Pete Carroll's trying to get back in, Bill Belichick's jumping in, and they're in their 70s. He said you walked away. Do you feel like there's a generation of players that like people missed out by not getting Bill McCartney, whether it had been at Colorado or somewhere else?
In some ways I do. I find myself always trying to articulate to people what our Thursday night meetings were like and these talks that he would give. And, you would always hear, and rightfully so, Lou Holtz and some of those guys get credit for.
We lost your audio. Okay, there you go. No, you're back. You're back. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Some of these legendary coaches that are known for their ability to get up front of their team and get them ready to play. And I think that Mac was second to none when it came to that. And just very, very fortunate to have been a part of being a part of those talks and those things in front of the team. He was special. The Promise Keepers, which of course he ended up being known for that more than even what he did as a coach. How much did that become a part of the program even before it became national, as far as not agenda, but a model and how you live life? Well, I think when Mac recruited players, he knew coming out of high school sort of their background, what they were about, how they were raised. There were those of us who were active in FCA and some different things on campus, and there were those of us who weren't. But we were certainly involved in Promise Keepers if we chose to be. And And it was really for him a devotion to his family. I think you could make the argument and the connection that Promise Keepers and some of that was what ultimately drove him away from coaching, was his devotion to family, his devotion to his faith, and his priorities in life.
Okay, so 94 is last year, 11-1, which is a great way to go out, beating Notre Dame in the Fiesta Bowl. But I don't think people remember beating Notre Dame as much as they do the Hail Mary. Do you look, I'm not a Colorado or a Michigan fan, and I watch that still to this day, 30 years later, and I get like, oh my God, over and over again, it's still the most ridiculous Hail Mary I think I've ever seen.
It's funny. It's one of those moments, they always say, what do you have, like 5 of these in your life? And I still remember exactly where I was on the 35 going in, on a knee next to Matt Lepsis, a former Texas high school kid, and in my recruiting class. And Matt and I were sitting there, and I think we were kind of like, wow, when we got close. And, it was such a launch for Cordell to even get it close. But I remember him dropping back, and I still kind of have this freeze frame of the ball hanging up in the lights, and a moment kind of thinking like, wow, that's going to get there. And then you see our guys go up and tip it. And I thought I saw Westbrook go up and grab it in the back. And then it's kind of blackout from there. Everyone kind of stormed the end zone, but agree. It was just amazing to be a part of that moment in college football.
During that time in the Big 8, I mentioned Oklahoma and Nebraska had a stranglehold for many, many years. But that Colorado in 1971, and in that year, Paul, you just brought up 11-1, 94, Nebraska won it. They were right there. In 71, it was Nebraska, Oklahoma, Colorado, 1, 2, and 3. I mean, that was when they had a stranglehold on national top fives. And how hard was it to break through?
And you're asking me for in when I was there, or in 1971?
Well, no. I'm just the history of Colorado football. I mean, it's just like that they always, they were in a conference that was, at the time, they ran a lot of things themselves with what they had, the success of 2 mega programs. But Colorado was a lot of times, there were times they were a mess, but they were sometimes really good. They just happened to be in that same conference.
That's right. And I hate to go back to these references with my kids, but I tell them, the old Big 8, was the powerhouse physical conference and the whole thing. And again, you go back to Mac coming from Michigan and kind of bringing that physical Bo Schembechler style of football to Boulder in the mid 80s. And, as you stated, there was some success early there in the 70s. I think Brian Cabral was on some of those teams. My position coach, who's kind of a legendary coach at Colorado, played linebacker at CU. But I think it was hard for CU, always kind of being in the shadow of those big 2 teams. And so for Mac to come and pull off what he did in the time that he did, and the level of success and consistency that he had was really, really something special and cool to be a part of.
What was it like watching what they did this year? I know it didn't end well, but what was it like watching them turn the corner a little last year and then fall flat because of the schedule? And this year, when things, maybe the expectations weren't quite as high, they made the run the way they did.
Yeah, it's been great for the state. It's been great for the fan base. I mean, the excitement in the state. Again, you go back to those teams in the 90s and the number of games that were on TV and it was so long we had to search for games and where are they streaming them, and now you got every game on national TV, and Colorado's got a national fan following back, and the student body's excited again, and the fans the stadium's packed. It's the old excitement, and I think you could even add some to it when you factor in that it's 2024 and the social media aspect and the excitement and the way you can reach fans. It's been great for the state and the school.
Your only loss in 1994, and Coach McCarthy's only loss in 1994 was to Nebraska, which 94 Nebraska, I guess 95 is considered the pinnacle, but there's a lot of overlap there. Looking at the 12-team playoff now, does that you see it and go oh man, would have loved to get another shot at those guys?
Yeah, it's funny, those games do. And I may be wrong, but I believe that our class was 40 wins, 7 losses, 1 tie with bowl games factored in over that 4-year period. But 4 of those losses were to Nebraska, and we never beat them. And I think those teams with Tommy Frazier and that offensive line and Coach Osborne had it going on, and those defenses, the black shirts. Those were special teams, and I think some of the best teams in all of college football. But absolutely, to answer your question, with the way things are set up today, it'd be nice to get a crack at those guys again a second time in a season, especially after the result the first time around.
How hard was it to tackle Frazier? If you got to him.
Yeah, I'll tell you just a quick funny story. He, again, you remember these certain little plays, and I don't remember a whole lot. It's been a long time, but he was a freight train. He was really a running back playing quarterback, but he could also sneaky throw it. He could get the ball down the field when he needed to, and there were times, if you remember, Nebraska would throw the ball 15 times a game or 10 times a game, but he would run those options. He would turn it upfield, and I do remember one where I kind of lost it in the shuffle and went to make the play, got run over, and thought that it was the big running back. And as I looked over my shoulder, he was kind of waltzing into the end zone about 20 yards down the field, and I thought, boy, that was a quarterback. And but that was what he was. I mean, he was a special college football player. He really was. He was a great player.
Matt, we appreciate your time. What was the text like? Did you guys have a bunch of text chains going on over the weekend with Coach Mack, as far as about Coach Mack?
Yeah, there sure is. There's, as you know, obviously there's ones that you've got so many different buddies and groups of guys. You're on so many different ones, and so a lot of tributes going back and forth and stories being shared. And as you can imagine, most everyone's found out about it now, but guys were finding out about it over the weekend, and just a lot of memories being shared and that kind of thing. Things that Coach Mack would want going on, guys reconnecting and those kind of things that I know he'd be happy about.
I know you're busy, man. We appreciate your time, Matt. With the Lombardi trophies in the background, 4-time Super Bowl champion. Thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Matt Russell, former Colorado linebacker, wore that 16. He was tough as nails. Played for Bill McCartney, who passed away, Hall of Famer, and we appreciate him for jumping on to kind of discuss Coach McCartney's role in his life and also his impact, too.
And he works for the Eagles.
Yep.
But we weren't allowed to talk about that.
Yep.
Which I think ultimately is a good thing for a Cowboys and 3 Washington fans not to have to pretend to wish the Eagles good luck in the playoffs.
I like the way they're built. I sent you a text yesterday. They're basically the number 1 defense. Offensive line, I think, is rated number 1. They have a kid, Braun, who had a pick, who had 150. Braun had a pick, 150 tackles, 5 forced cost fumbles, recoveries. First time that's happened in forever. They find ways. That is how they continue to win. At some point, will they be up against it? I don't know. But they're really good. I don't know if they can get where they need to go, though, if they're not throwing the ball well, and they're not right now.
They have a general manager who is willing to admit when none of this is working and will tear it down to the foundation and rework it.
Yeah.
Don't worry. That's what Jerry's doing now. That's why he's going to find the new coach. He's understanding of what he needs to do now. Now he's ready to take them back to the Super Bowl.
I promise you, unless it's Pete Carroll, whoever the coach is will still have a Cowboys sweatshirt in their closet.
Oh, you mean at some point because of having some sort of knowing that person or relationship with that person?
I think it's going to be Kellen Moore. That's what I think it's going to be.
Kellen Moore would make a lot of damn sense. Yeah, nice to take it away from Philadelphia.
But there's a lot of nervousness on Twitter right now that it might be Jason Witten.
Yeah, I heard that.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I don't think that makes any sense, even for Jerry. I know that we probably don't give him any credit over anything now. But, come on. He's not going to hire Jason Witten to be the next head coach of the Cowboys, especially with a Kellen Moore available. But it does not have to sit well with any Cowboys fans to watch Washington now competent with their front office and what that looks like. And obviously Philadelphia has been pretty competent up front for a while now. It's just the Giants that are still kind of roaming through the woods, and maybe they get it all together now. I don't know. But, yeah, it's a great time to be a Washington fan, and I haven't been able to say that in 20-something years. So not shedding any tears for the Cowboys, but I liked Mike McCarthy. I thought he was a pretty good coach. I can also understand where he couldn't get over that hump or whatever, but is that him or is that more? Is there more to it than just that? Yeah.
Briefly, I'll tell you, it does not matter who they hire because nothing's going to change. So I don't really think it's McCarthy's fault. And I don't think it was necessarily Jason Garrett's fault as much.
I wonder how many coaches who won 12 games 3 times in a row, 3 consecutive years, have then eventually been fired unless they just ran afoul with disaster. Not many, I wouldn't think. By the way, Jamie Uyama will join us in about 25 minutes. He covers Notre Dame. Coming up, Dan Hope, 11 Warriors, covers Ohio State. We have a lot to get to. We'll have a deeper segment on Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys and the NFL playoffs and more in the 5 o'clock hour. This is 365 Sports. The Baylor Club, tucked inside McLean Stadium, just off I-35 in Waco. And a new year. They have a tasting event that's coming up. They do that all the time. The chefs go, okay, let's try a few new things. Let's try to see what you think about this particular dish or maybe some specific cuisine. By the way, if you are interested in a membership at the Baylor Club inside McLean Stadium, tell them that you are a listener or viewer of Sikkim 365 or a viewer of 365 Sports, and they will give you 2 months membership free. Stop by the Baylor Club. They host events. They host rehearsal dinners. They host speaking engagements, banquets, and much, much more. And it's a great place. The amenities are amazing inside McLean Stadium and also a partner with us on 365 Sports. The Baylor Club, a tasting event coming up later on this month where you can taste the newest cuisine from their chefs. And my goodness, the food is already delicious as it is, whether they add more to it or not. The Baylor Club, General Manager Mike Mosel, tell them Sikkim 365 or 365 Sports sent you.
Hi, I'm Mark Stewart with Bird Colgan Ford. It's that time of year, it's football season. Bird Colgan Ford is a proud supporter of the best high school football right here in Central Texas. BK Ford is proud to sell the #1 selling truck in Texas, the F-Series truck, 47 years in a row. Come see the largest showroom in Texas and experience better at Bird Colgan Ford.
Established in 2007 and independently owned, Alliance Bank Central Texas is committed to helping families and businesses meet their financial goals. From their tellers to their board of directors, they know the importance of superior service and competitive products. Customers have confidence knowing that their financial needs are in good hands. It's your bank, Alliance Bank Central Texas, with 2 Waco locations, 4721 Bosque Boulevard and 191 Archway Drive on Highway 84, and at AllianceBankTexas.com. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
It's football and tailgate season. If you want product for the grill or smoker, charcoal, seasonings, marinades, sauces, Waco Custom Marketplace is your home to help prep, cook, and enjoy your food. Tailgate must-like brisket, tri-tip, fresh-made burgers, sausage, chicken wings, and if you want steaks, call in your order and pick them up. Bacon wrap fillets or any kind of ribeyes. USDA Select, Choice, and Prime that melt in your mouth. House-made sausage and jerky. Also, Waco Custom Marketplace, a one-stop shop for tailgating, barbecue cook-offs, and family get-togethers, fundraisers with fair prices to you, the customer. A bakery with fresh baked bread and kolaches. There's cold beer, wine, and soft drinks. Serving Waco restaurants and families since 1940. A cut above the rest. Waco Custom Marketplace, open Monday through Saturday at 425 Lake Air Drive in Waco.
Pizza, burgers, and Bears football. There's no place around Waco that serves them all other than Bubba's 33. Come show your green and gold and enjoy some of Waco's best food and beverages while watching your favorite team, the Bears. When real Bears fans get hungry, Bubba's 33 is the #1 spot for ice-cold drinks, hand-stretched, stone-baked pizzas, and bacon-infused burgers. Join us for indoor or patio dining. Bubba's 33, Waco's restaurant and proud supporter of Baylor Bears football. Sick 'em, Bears.
This is 365 Sports. Text us at 254-339-1122. The text line is sponsored by Riverbend Liquor and Wine, with the most extensive variety of craft beer in Waco. A hidden gem on Lakeshore Drive and 19th Street.
All right, here we go. 365 Sports in the 4 o'clock hour. Dan Hope, 11 Warriors, joins us after their semifinal win Friday night against Texas. Dan, thanks for your time. It looked like early that Ohio State was way too much. Not that they were going to dominate and blow them out, but then they started playing with their food a little bit, and a couple of penalties that hurt them, like it hurts anybody. In the end, how do you summarize what we saw Friday night, how both teams responded to adversity? The screen pass at the end of the first half was nuts. And then, of course, the strip by Sawyer, Warren, that ended the game, by all means ended the game.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes in these big games like this, it all just comes down to, who makes that big play in the fourth quarter to change the game. And that's certainly what Jack Sawyer did there on that 4th and goal play. I mean, you're talking about Texas. They score on that, goal line possession. It's a tie game and anything can happen. And, Ohio State's defense collectively did a phenomenal job there on that goal line stand. Caleb Downs, Lathan Ransom doing a great job blowing up that 2nd down run play for a 7-yard loss, which then really forced Texas into a passing situation on those 3rd and 4th down plays. And then for, Jack Sawyer to make the play he did. I mean, it really went from, someone sitting there in the press box covering the game. Until that play, I'm sitting there going, I have no idea who's going to win this game. And then just like that, in an instant, it was like Ohio State just won the game. So, I think, certainly that play was the biggest story of the game. But, like you mentioned, that screen pass was huge because, it felt like Texas was going to have all the momentum going into halftime. And then Ohio State was able to kind of take that back with the screen to Henderson. Didn't necessarily sustain that momentum there in the 3rd quarter. It really took them until the 4th quarter to go up there and win the game. But to put together that drive they did at the start of the 4th quarter, 88 yards, 13 plays, and then, of course, following it up with the big defensive touchdown, it was really those 2 moments that won this game for the Buckeyes.
Dan, I'm a big atmosphere and vibes guy. You said you're the press box, but just what was that like in the press box? And what was that like just seeing the stadium, particularly for the Sawyer play there at the end? I mean, it seemed like pandemonium on TV. I can only imagine what it must have been like to just be amongst the people there at AT&T Stadium.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say I probably got a better feel for it after the game than I did in the moment because I was up in the press box. But just being down on the field, I was there when Jack Sawyer was walking off the field. And, if all the Ohio State fans there, it really felt like, a hero exiting the stage with the kind of ovation that he got from the Buckeye fans. And so, it was a pro-Texas crowd. I mean, Texas did have more fans there, which you would expect for a game being in Texas, but Ohio State fans still showed up very well for as far away as it was from home. And there were certainly a lot of them there to, help Jack Sawyer and the rest of those Buckeyes bask in that moment.
Dan, how much can we, from these 2 teams, look, as the quarterbacks at Notre Dame's different, a lot of things are different. The quarterback at Ohio State's different. How much can we glean from last year's game that ended because Marcus Freeman forgot a guy on the field there? Or do you consider this as a completely different slate with not much to learn from that one?
I think it's a different game. I mean, it's 16 months have passed since then. You're talking about early in the 2023 season versus the very end now of a 2024 season. And there's so many new key pieces on both these teams. Like you mentioned, both quarterbacks. Yeah, there are still a lot of players on both sides who were there last year. But, I mean, you think about the way that Ohio State Notre Dame game ended a year ago. It was Kyle McCord handing the ball off to Chip Trayanum. Both those guys played for different college football teams this year. So I think so much changes on a year-to-year basis in college football now that it's hard to look back at a game from 16 months ago and really say that that's going to influence a whole lot of what happens in this year's game. I think probably the thing that, looking at it from kind of the Ohio State perspective, looking at Notre Dame, I think the thing you take away is, in that game a year ago, they were a team that was, a really strong defensive team that, wanted to run the ball. And I think Notre Dame is still that kind of team. I think, Ohio State a year ago was an elite defensive team, and that's still the bedrock of their team. I think this Ohio State team is more explosive passing the ball through the air than last year's team was. And I think that's the hope for Ohio State, is it doesn't come down to that last second because you've got a little more offensive firepower than you did a year ago.
Do you think that Will Howard, the first drive was brilliant? Did he get a little tight? Was there, or because they couldn't stretch the field, they had a couple of chances to hit Smith or whatever, but did he start to play a little bit tight in that, especially that second quarter?
I don't know that I would use tight, because I think that, if you watch through the game, I think there were a lot of instances of him taking chances down the field. I do think there was a stretch there in the middle of the game where you could sense some frustration with some of the penalties, with some of the lapses on the offensive line. I can remember one moment, it was either in the second or third quarter. I don't remember exactly which drive, but he either got sacked or he got pressured and had to throw the ball away, and you could kind of see him like spike the ball in frustration. And so I do think there was a point there in that game where Ohio State, I think for me, like sitting up there was a part of that game where I'm starting to thinking, is this going to be Michigan all over again? Because it was kind of that similar script there for a while where Ohio State's defense kept making the plays it needed to make, but its offense couldn't put drives together. And I think you started to wonder there for a bit, is this going to be a repeat of a Michigan game where Ohio State just can't put together the drive that it needs? But all the differences, unlike in that game this time around, the fourth quarter, the Buckeyes were able to make the plays they needed on both sides of the ball to eventually get that win.
What did you think about Texas' ability, just in general during that game? But particularly, I think the thing most talked about was their ability to basically eliminate Jeremiah Smith from the game plan. Your thoughts on just how they stacked up in that particular angle? I'm sure there's going to be a concerted effort to try and correct that against the Irish if at all possible.
Yeah, I mean, you got to give him a lot of credit, because you look at what Jeremiah Smith did against Tennessee and Oregon. He went into that game and you almost had this feel like this guy's unstoppable, like nobody can stop him. And Texas found a way to do that. They effectively took him out of the game. And so you got to give them credit for that. And I'm sure Notre Dame is studying everything they can from that game to try to duplicate that. I would be surprised if Jeremiah has one catch for 3 yards again in the national championship, but certainly I think there's things Notre Dame can learn. I mean, a lot of it goes back to the fact that Texas has a really good secondary. I mean, maybe the best secondary in the country this year. And so I think, they had an ability to match up with Jeremiah Smith that very few teams do. But Notre Dame has a really good secondary too. So it'll be interesting to see if they can duplicate that at all.
Yeah, the UT's defense was good, and I tell you what, in the end, that's what gave them a chance, because they started to shut down Ohio State's run game. Let's go back to the screen pass before the half. 7-7 after all of what I had seen for the 29 minutes. I was like, damn, Texas, I think, should be fortunate that they're tied right now because of how it could have, the way it was. That play, what was it like watching that happen? And I saw what Henderson made a cutback to avoid Makuba. And, I mean, it was like a kid being shot out of a cannon.
Yeah, I mean, Travion, that's what Travion can do. He's one of the most explosive backs in the country, and, he gets ahead of steam in the open field. He can really do some special things, and I think we saw that several times in this game. And, certainly I think, you think to, all the great plays he's made in his career, that's probably the best one right there, because, you're thinking at that point, they're probably just going to, run one play and let it go into the half. And, it was on paper a pretty safe play call. Travion just made a spectacular play. I think, he gains 10, 15 yards. They're probably calling a timeout. They're probably trying to set something up to get in range for a field goal. But, they didn't have to worry about any of that because he just made such a spectacular play.
Dan, this team is loaded for Bear. They're so deep and all these things. What would you say is the thing that will trip them up in this Notre Dame game? Can Notre Dame make this game like the Michigan game?
Well, certainly, I think the biggest question mark is the offensive line, because I think you saw against Texas, I think that offensive line, which has been the question mark of his team all season, especially since Josh Simmons and Seth McLaughlin went down, didn't play as well against Texas as it had in the first two CFP games. So I think certainly, if you're Notre Dame, you're hoping you can replicate some of that. You'd certainly like to have Riley Mills still if you're Notre Dame, but they've still got enough talent up front, but I think they can cause some problems for Ohio State in the trenches. I think that, if you can get Ohio State's offense out of whack, like Texas did for a lot of that game, then you've got a chance. But I think if you're Notre Dame, you're going to have to, because I think with Notre Dame being a very run-heavy offense and how well this Ohio State run defense has been, if this game becomes a shootout, it's going to strongly favor Ohio State. And so I think, if you're Notre Dame, you have to make it like that Michigan game. You have to make it a low-scoring, tight battle. If you do that, you're going to have a chance. But if you allow Ohio State to get Jeremiah Smith going again, to get that explosive passing game going, I think Ohio State will certainly have the upper hand.
Dan, as somebody who lives in the South and, doesn't have in-depth personal knowledge of Ohio State and the fan base, that's why we have you on, is to give us some insight on that. What's the feel about playing Notre Dame? Obviously, whoever you're playing, you just want to beat them to win a national championship, but you'd think these teams have played a lot more than they have over the course of the last 100 years. They really haven't played all that often, but when they have, it's been all Ohio State over the last few decades. So just how is Notre Dame sort of viewed in terms of, Ohio State fans and opponents overall?
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because, like you said, they've kind of become a familiar foe here the last few years. But historically, these are not two teams that have played each other very often, despite the fact they're only a few hours away from each other. So, I think that, it's probably an opponent that, there's probably some more confidence for Ohio State fans than maybe if you're going against a Georgia type team or an Alabama type team, because you do have a very good history against them in all the recent games that you've played against them. But, I think there's also some pride, I think, for people up in this area of, hey, we've got two Northern Midwest teams in the national championship game, because, it's there's been such, an SEC presence in that game in recent years. But I think for, 2 years in a row now to have two Northern teams playing in the national championship game is, I think, something that a lot of people up here take pride in.
Dan Hope, 11 Warriors, Ohio State, Notre Dame. It's a long wait, but I can see where the decompression of this week might help. Everybody kind of just take a deep breath. I wish they were playing this week because it's just such momentum after the two games we saw. Any health issues that Ohio State has to kind of make sure that some players are healed between now and Monday?
Nothing major. The biggest question right now would be Denzel Burke, one of their starting cornerbacks. He suffered a shoulder injury late in the first half of that game against Texas, and he didn't play the rest of the game. So, he'll be one to monitor. We did see JT Tuimoloau, tweak his ankle in the first half against Texas, but was able to return in the second half, was still very productive. Will Howard had that welt on his hand, but that didn't really affect him at all. So I think by and large, Ohio State, at this point of the season, obviously they've lost those two really good offensive linemen, which is, something that continues to be something they have to work through. But other than that, to not have any other major injuries, I think to be playing your 16th game of the season, you feel pretty good about where you're at right now.
Okay, Dan, I have one question. So say they win next week, and the Michigan game means nothing. How will that faction of the Ohio State fan base that holds all of their emotions on that one game every year deal with that, and will they need some sort of therapy?
I mean, there's always going to be a segment of this fan base who puts the Michigan game above all else. It's going to be, it holds so much weight in both Ohio State and Michigan circles that it's certainly something that I know this, that if Ohio State wins, it's only going to make the Michigan fans louder about the fact that they beat Ohio State this year, and they've beaten Ohio State 4 years in a row. So that's something Ohio State fans are going to have to live with at least until next November. Michigan fans are still going to have those bragging rights, but I think by and large, the general tone of the fan base is a heck of a lot different right now than it was 6 weeks ago. I mean, it's pretty crazy to think about that there was a not insignificant portion of the Ohio State fan base who was ready for a coaching change after Ohio State lost to Michigan. And now Ryan Day is one step away from becoming a national champion. So it's certainly been a pretty massive tone shift around this program over the last 6 weeks.
It's kind of like they'll sleep with one eye open if he wins the national title, but by God, next November, he better watch his you-know-what, right?
Yeah, I mean, the pressure of winning that game is not going to go away. So
no,
even winning the national championship, that's not going to suddenly give him a free pass in the Michigan game. But when there was all the talk about the hot seat stuff, I think he can certainly put that away with one more win.
I thought one of the questions yesterday when they asked him about Lou Holtz because of that thing about tough and all that, and have you talked to him since? Nope. It was brought up. I don't know if they will. Dan, thank you, man. Great stuff. Congratulations on the win for Ohio State. Should be one great game to watch. I hope next Monday against Notre Dame. Have a great week.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
Dan Hope, he is from 11 Warriors covering the Buckeyes of Ohio State. Jamie Uyeyama, he is next on Notre Dame from the Irish Daily. This is 365 Sports. TexasBeefHouse.com. They just had another auction last week. I dropped in it for just a little bit to kind of just look around, see what they had. And, of course, they have Angus farm-raised, home-raised, right there in their, on their ranch, Angus cattle. Also, Wagyu, steaks, hamburger meat, and much more. And sausage. And you want it, they have it. The beef that they raise from the time of birth, basically, until it's time for the chance for you to cut into a beautiful, delicious steak. I had some Wagyu steak. I cut it into some fajitas over the weekend. It's fantastic. You think about a steak, man, I want my bone-in ribeye or ribeye New York strip right there in front of me for me to have it with baked potato, a salad, and something else. But I did it. I put it into some fajita strips, and fantastic. The Duvall family, what they've done since they opened up the business, since they decided this is what we're going to do, and they've helped change the landscape of how people acquire, buy, or purchase, and even raise their beef. TexasBeefHouse.com, just outside of Tyler and White House. With more information on their next auction, go to bidonbeef.com or straight to TexasBeefHouse.com.
Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics, the team physicians for Baylor Athletics, diagnosing and treating all sports-related injuries, including concussions. These specialists also provide orthopedic services for athletes and non-athletes alike, whether it's knee or shoulder pain, a wrist injury, orthopedic spine care, and even an arthritis and total joint clinic. Trust the doctors Baylor Athletics trust. Baylor Scott & White Southwest Sports Medicine and Orthopedics wants to get you back in the game.
Ready to take your business to the next level? Carrion Solutions has got you covered. We deliver world-class IT consulting, including Quest On Demand and Migration Manager, M365 and Exchange migrations, Active Directory assessments, security hardening, and Windows Server upgrades. Our experts specialize in consulting, monitoring, support, and managed IT services. We promise vision, professionalism, and unbeatable value. Satisfaction guaranteed. If you're not happy, we make it right. Remember the name Carrion Solutions. For more info, email sales@carrionsolutions.com or visit carrionsolutions.com. That's CARRION solutions.com. Carrion Solutions IT success guaranteed.
Developed by Startup Waco, a nonprofit organization, GXG is a program designed to support the entrepreneurial development of Baylor University student athletes through NIL activations. The program helps student athletes maximize their platforms and offers a comprehensive support system for them to create and grow new businesses that not only benefit themselves, but also uplift the local economy. Fans who wish to support student athletes can donate to GXG via the GXG NIL Fund, BaylorBears.com/GXG. Contributions to support NIL activations through GXG can be made at BaylorBears.com/GXG. For more information, follow @GXG_GreenXGold on social media and visit the official website www.gxg.startupwaco.com. GXG, empowering student athlete entrepreneurship and uplifting the local economy through NIL activations.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com.
The 4 o'clock hour is sponsored by Boozer's Jewelers, the wedding ring store, specializing in custom jewelry and repair, all in-house.
Now here's David Smoak, Paul Catalina, and Craig Smoak.
Jamie Uyeyama joins us with Irish Daily. Christian McCollum's the one that suggested we get a hold of Jamie for a segment. He joins us now on 365 Sports. Good afternoon. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
We're doing great. Notre Dame, what a story this is. What is it? What's the thought right now? 1 week from tonight, they're playing Ohio State for a national championship with what Marcus Freeman's done, what in year 3. What is the mood, the thought around Irish Nation, also in South Bend, Indiana?
I think everybody's pretty ecstatic about how the season's gone, especially how considering the stumble against Northern Illinois. I don't think there's a single person either who within the program or outside of the program that would have predicted that Notre Dame would kind of go on the run that they did after. But it's all a credit to Marcus Freeman and the coaching staff in general for the job that they've done, and to the players as well. Obviously, they've just had tremendous adversity this year, and far more than just that loss to Ohio State. This is easily the most injuries that I can remember, well before they even got to the college football playoff. They've had to overcome a ton of season-ending injuries to key players, 4 starters on defense, several players on the offensive line that was kind of like a rebuilding offensive line. And they just plugged people in and just kept going. And it's really been remarkable, what they've done, what they've accomplished, how they've played total team football. The defense has been elite all season, and just really the growth of Riley Leonard, obviously on offense, and what they've done on the offense side of the ball. They've just done a tremendous job coaching this group.
Jamie, what was the turning point for Marcus Freeman in that they had Marshall, Northern Illinois this year? They had these games that, Ohio State last year where they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, so to speak. And now the last, this part of the season, but especially in the playoff, this looks like a guy who's found himself and is coaching as free and easy and as fun as you can imagine.
Yeah, I think some of it is those experiences and losing those games. And I think, normally you wouldn't say that losing games like that would be a way to, get better, but you learn from your losses. You learn from those mistakes. And they've grown from them, and he's grown from them. And I think that's been a big thing where there's a big difference between how he's approached certain things in terms of how aggressive he is in year 1. I think he, played it a lot safer, punted sometimes when I think people wanted to go for him. Maybe the analytics said to go for him, go for it. He didn't. He's just been much more aggressive, much more strategic about how the in-game coaching, that has definitely improved a long way. But I don't think there's anything that's changed in terms of what he's done in order to connect with the players, to motivate the players, because they've lost those games that maybe they shouldn't have, but they have been up for big games. And I know that one of the things, when they played USC last year, when they played Clemson in 2022, those were games where I think people wouldn't have predicted them to do as well as they were heading into those games, and they dominated those matchups. So it's kind of been brewing there for a while. And obviously you had the Northern Illinois setback. But if you look at the week before, they go into, Kyle Field, one of the toughest places to play in the country, and won that game, and got up for that game in a way where they had a lot of new pieces there, really kind of stepped it up. And I think it's just been building over time where you see that, and everyone's kind of bought in. And I think the other thing is, adding Mike Denbrock as the offensive coordinator, I think he's really done just a tremendous job. Obviously, he was at LSU last year. Coach Jaden Daniels and their terrific offense last year. This is a much different offense, and he's adapted to it. He's adapted to Riley Leonard. He's adapted to the talent. He's adapted to all the injuries, and I think really kind of like settled into who they are and leaned into the strengths of the team.
Speaking of injuries, Jamie, Anthony Knapp goes down, and he's going to miss this next game. It was announced, and other guys that are banged up as well. Just kind of how do you feel about their status heading into this game? And obviously, losing somebody on the offensive line against a team like Ohio State is not the news that you wanted, but what kind of shape are they in your estimation?
I mean, they're not in good shape. Like, I don't think and they haven't been in good shape in the offensive line, even kind of before that, just based on kind of where their depth was. And if you look at the defensive line too, obviously they lost Riley Mills after the Indiana game. He had been their best defensive lineman all year. Howard Cross was an All-American last year. I mean, he's playing, but he's basically playing on one ankle, and he's been like that for many weeks now. He missed 3 games towards the end of the season with a high ankle sprain. And he really hasn't been the same since he's been back. And he started the year, he had like a tweaked hammy, and he wasn't quite there. Finally got there, and then the ankle happened. So they've lost a couple of edge rushers. They've lost guys. They've lost Charles Jagusaw was supposed to be the left tackle at the start of the year. Tore his pec first week of camp. Came in, hadn't played a snap all season with the offense. Stepped in at right guard, did a heck of a job. So there's a chance that he might play left tackle in this game. It depends what they want to do with Tosh Baker, who filled in at left tackle in the game against Penn State. And Jagusaw is a beast. He's going to be a stud. He's going to be a very, very high pick. So it might not be as big of a drop-off there as you think, but still, you're getting a guy who hasn't really been playing that. He has very little experience compared to Knapp, obviously, who played that whole game, and it's just another kind of moving piece there. They've kind of patched it together the whole way, and just no matter what, whenever you've kind of thought, well, the dam's going to break. There's this injury, it's going to go. Ben Morrison, their All-American corner, they lost him too. And it just really hasn't mattered because they've had guys to step up. It's a different animal going against Ohio State, easily the most talented team that Notre Dame has played all season, probably the most talented team in the country. But you just kind of learn to never doubt Notre Dame and from no matter what the circumstances are.
How, besides the obvious, Jaden Greathouse, a young man who played at Westlake High School about an hour and a half south of us, had his best game, I think, since he's been at Notre Dame. Maybe I'm missing one prior to this year, but wide open on the one, made the 2 guys miss, broke ankles twice on that play when he got free and then also when he got loose at the end. How important was it? Because they don't really have what looks like the dog at wide receiver, but he was fantastic.
Oh, he was awesome, and it was definitely the best game of his career. But like you said, like he was an impact guy, one of the best high school players in Texas, one of the best receivers. I know he's breaking records there, and that's a very historic program with a lot of big time guys that have come out of it. And I think he was kind of on the verge of this the whole year, but part of this was, their passing game hadn't really gone going. And I think you could look at it as some of the receivers, maybe they don't have enough guys who have stepped up, but I think a lot of it was kind of, they're doing whatever it takes to win that week. And they're also just leaning into, they have such a good backfield with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, 2 explosive guys. Obviously Leonard is a very dangerous runner too. So I think some of that had took away from maybe developing, the receiver position like you'd want to, but they desperately needed someone to do that. He's the first guy who's had a 100-yard game for Notre Dame all season. And they've had guys who've had spurts there where, maybe it looked like, oh, maybe this will be the guy. And frankly, like, you don't want to say like, oh, now this is like, that's Greathouse's coming out party. But I honestly think it might be because he had just showed he had such a great spring ball. He had such a great fall camp. And there were times during the season where it looked like it was about to happen, but then he maybe only got like a couple targets one week, a couple targets here, a couple targets there. But he's just been Mr. Consistent all the time. He's a tremendous route runner and just a tremendous competitor. And I'm just like a big believer in a guy that, when a guy goes in and he's like produced in the biggest moments against top competition, playing in like high pressure moments in Texas high school football, it's not a big deal to jump into these other things. It's just like, that's what he's used to going into a CFPU game and producing like that.
The history of Notre Dame football, it's hard to imagine that it has been since 1988 when they won a national title. I know they've had a couple of times when they dipped that toe in the water. How to see a picture of Joe Theismann and Tim Brown and Jerome Bettis. We had Bobby Taylor on our show last week, the great cornerback back when Holtz was there. How excruciating, or that's maybe too harsh of a word, that they've been good, but they haven't really been relevant at the top, which is hard to do in this day and age of college football because it's been like a group of 5 to 7 teams.
I mean, I would say that most Notre Dame fans would call it excruciating. Most of the people, at Irish Sports Daily, like the subscribers there's a lot of obviously older gentlemen who have been like there all the way dating back to Eric Parsegian, right? That maybe they went to school during that time. And so they experienced a completely different level. They went through obviously the Holtz years where they had a ton of success, putting so many guys in the NFL. And they've kind of, and it was dark times for like basically a couple decades really at Notre Dame where they'd have a year here or there, but Bob Davie, Tyrone Willingham, Charlie Weiss, it was just never going to be consistent. And you got to give credit to Brian Kelly for what he did to get them back up into like kind of like that tier below there. And obviously they made a national championship game. They made the college football playoff twice, but this is a different kind of team. And definitely Marcus Freeman has improved the roster greatly. Like there's no way you could deny that, even if I don't care about recruiting rankings. You just look at the product on the field and all the guys who've been injured, and then like the freshmen that have come in. And some of these guys aren't all blue chip guys, but they play like blue chip guys and certainly have. So I think they've done a tremendous job with evaluating, developing these guys. The coaching staff is I've covered the team for a decade. This is easily the best coaching staff that they've had since I've been covering the team. And really, like, Notre Dame fans are desperate. They're desperate to, be back here. And I think it's a different feeling, too, that even if they don't win this game, and obviously they're not favored to win this game, this isn't the end. This isn't just like hey, this was a great run. This is like the start of something under Marcus Freeman.
Go ahead, Paul.
Well, I mean, to that end, there's, rumors out there about the NFL. Has he ever said anything about being interested in that, and how worried do fans get about that possibility?
I mean, he's never expressed interest. He's been asked about it. He just signed like a big extension. So he's, one of the highest paid coaches in college football. Obviously making this run right now, that's bringing a ton of more money into the program in terms of like the payout of what they get for the college football from the college football playoff committee and all that. Plus, like, you guys know that whenever a program does well, the more money people pump into it. Right. And especially when you see when people have belief, like the donors have belief of where they're going, they're going to get put even more money into it. So I don't think that he has a desire to coach in the NFL. Nothing that I've heard has suggested that. There's always going to be people worrying about, whether or not that might be a possibility. And certainly that was something that, people were bitter about with Brian Kelly because he kind of flirted with that. And I think he kind of always wanted to go there, but then he never got the opportunity. He never got offered a job. So I don't think Marcus Freeman is going to do that. Maybe one day that will be the next thing. He's obviously a young guy, right? Like he could coach at Notre Dame for the next 15 years and then decide, hey, well, now I want to check that. But he's put so much into the program. He's you can just tell it's just genuine and sincere about what the program means to him. So I don't think there is that much of a worry from the fan base overall, other than just like the regular people, just like who are always worried about something happening with the program.
You know, you think about the drought at 88, but Georgia, what was it, Herschel Walker? Until they got on their run recently. Alabama, of course, they throw them out. But even they've had gaps. Texas went from 1970 to 05 and then 05 until now. It happens, right? I mean, there's always going to be a downtime. Ohio State's one of the few that just never went through a complete, like, massive drought. Michigan has, others have as well. It's good to see him back in it. It's good to see him involved in this. I've been impressed. I thought that Penn State game was a phenomenal game to watch. Jamie, thanks for your time, and also continued luck watching what they do the rest of this week and next week, and we'll see what happens against Ohio State a week from tonight. Thank you.
Thanks a lot for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, you too. Jamie Uyama with us with the Irish Sports Daily on the Fighting Irish, Marcus Freeman. The great story of the two teams playing for a national title. Quarterbacks played at Kansas State and Duke last year. It's college football as we have it today. When we come back, a couple of nuggets we'll get into, a college football notes. We'll look at more into that Texas-Ohio State game. R.J. Choppy of the Cowboys flagship in Dallas will join us a little after 5 o'clock on the Mike McCarthy News today. What's next, his reaction to that, and more. This is 365 Sports. Alan Samuels, Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram, Fiat, new month, but they always, every month, have something special for you to catch your attention with all the great vehicles they have in their lot in the Waco area. Alan Samuels in Waco, Ted Teague, General Manager and CEO, David Gray in charge of new car sales. The huge discounts on the Jeep Wagoneers and the Grand Wagoneers, plus 3.9% financing for 72 months. The affordable Jeep Compass is a loaner car that I drove for a few days from Alan Samuels when mine was being looked at. $25,995 and a lot of value bundled up in that little car, but it was more spacious than I thought. I drove it out of town a couple of different times and enjoyed it. The 2025 Jeep Grand Cherokee Laredo, the most decorated SUV in history, starting at $35,925 plus tax, title, and license. Car loaded with accessories like adaptive cruise control, full speed forward collision warning, park view, backup camera, so much more, and a 5-star rating, safety rating, which of course is huge. The 2025 Motor Trend Truck of the Year, the Ram 1500, they chalk these up like Tom Brady used to win Super Bowls with the Patriots. 1500, it's the 7th time they've won that prestigious award. Come by, drive it, test drive it, maybe buy it. Alan Samuels, Dodge, Chrysler, Jeep, Ram, Fiat, Loop 340 and east of 84 in Waco.
Get ready, Baylor fans. The ultimate game weekend experience awaits you at the Baylor Club. Kick off your weekend with our Friday Night Live pep rally. With live entertainment and special appearances from the Baylor Spirit Squad, it's the perfect way to start your game weekend with a roar. On Saturdays, don't miss our Knox Hall tailgate. Enjoy delicious food, ice-cold drinks, and great company as you gear up for the big game. And after the weekend's excitement, wrap it all up with our famous Bear brunches on Sundays. Don't wait. Make your game weekends legendary with a Baylor Club membership today.
There are 26 letters in the alphabet, over 600,000 words in the dictionary, and just 3 of them said together can change everything. Let's order pizza. Those 3 words lead to dough made from scratch and 3 fresh signature cheeses that blanket golden crust in a heavenly melt on Marco's Pizza that'll blow your mind. So visit Marcos.com to order and stop by Marco's Pizza in Belmead, China Spring, Woodway, and in Robinson. Marco's. Pizza lovers get it.
With so many companies and policies out there, it gets so confusing shopping for insurance, and I never know if I'm getting the policy that's right for me. Luckily, I met the team at the Niche Group Insurance Agency. With the Niche Group, you can go to one company and get access to coverage options from many insurance carriers, and you get to speak to a real person about your specific coverage needs. With the Niche Group, I know I'm getting the right coverage at the right price. If you need insurance, talk to the experts at the Niche Group at 1-800-258-8302.
This is 365 Sports.
The Sikkim 365 app is brought to you by Allen Samuels Dodge Chrysler Jeep Ram Fiat. Come by, let's be friends.
All right, we opened up discussing a couple of things. Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys have parted ways, and R.J. Choppy of 105.3 The Fan in Dallas will join us a little after 5 on that. And the reaction from the DFW area and, of course, around the country, too, including our show. And then, yes, the college football championship. Our meat, our bread and butter, our core of college football will be a week from tonight, Ohio State and also Notre Dame. This game, the way Ohio State started, I thought, man, they've been on a roll. I really thought this could be, 26-7 or something like that. I never thought Texas was out of the game. And sure enough, they found a way. There were a couple of plays. There were a couple of fumbles. Ewers on a sack, and there was another fumble in that moment where Texas was able to recover that really would have almost been like the Georgia game in Austin. But I was impressed that and it's not like Texas wants to be patted on the top of the head. They're really good. But I was impressed. I was like, my God, it's 7-7 at halftime. And then, of course, the Travion Henderson screen pass. I saw a lot of people barking at the call that UT did that they allowed that to happen. I also saw some of the quotes in the press conferences and anything after the game that they still had 7 in coverage. Travion Henderson made what could have been a 25 or 30-yard screen into a 75-yard dart that was unbelievable and then looked like, okay, they're still winning by 7.
Yeah, they never let themselves get knocked out or knocked, they got knocked down, they got back up. They didn't.
Who are you talking about?
Ohio State.
Okay.
Ohio State. They just didn't, that screen right before the half, I think kind of broke Texas's confidence in that. They're like, okay, we fought all this way to get here. Now we're in control of the game. All we got to do is run out these last few seconds of this, and then we're going to go in feeling good about ourselves. And then that Travion Henderson thing, I think, popped their emotional balloon, and they could never quite get it back. And Ohio State, for all these were the 2 deepest, best team, like all that in the league. They were just like that 2%, 1% better when it came down to it.
That's true, but they had the pick in the third quarter on Ohio State. They tied it up at 14, though, and it was back and forth. You thought that Texas had their balloon popped?
I think they did tie it, but I think it would have been a lot different had they gone in after that, without the screen pass.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I kind of understand where you're coming from, and that was deflating. But, yeah, it by no means put the game away because, as he just said, Texas scored in the third quarter and tied it up 14-14, and there they were at the end of the game with an opportunity at the 1-yard line to tie it up again to send it to overtime. So I don't think it was all that deflating. I think that it definitely took a little air out of their sails, but Ohio State didn't do anything right after that out there in the third quarter that put it away. That was the thing, is Ohio State never put it away until they did with Jack Sawyer. You could argue, allowed Texas in parts of that game, at least early on, when it felt like it was going to be this monsoon. When Ohio State comes out and scores right away, drives down the field, you're like, I don't know about everybody else, but their first drive, you're like, this is about to go the way a lot of the pundits said that it might, and this is going to be a potential blowout if Texas isn't careful. And even if you listen to Chris Fowler, they're like, oh, this is what we're it was 7-0. They're acting like it's 21-0. I mean, it was crazy. And it's like, no, it's just 7-0 here. Yeah. And then, Texas scores at 7-7. You feel great. And then, Travion Henderson pops that. And I mean, fair game to call out UT's decision-making there. I mean, a great player made a great play in a big moment, and they probably should have played it differently. They got busted on that one. It's still only 14-7, though. I felt like, if anything, yes, that took some wind out of their sails, but Texas had to be going damn, man, it's only 14-7. After all that, it's 14-7. We're still in this damn thing. And then, sure enough, you tie it up in the third quarter, and we know how the fourth quarter went, where they couldn't score again and had their opportunity there at the end to try and tie it up, and that turns into, obviously, Ohio State turning it into a 2-score game that they were unable to come back from. But I thought Texas played hard. But if there was a team they were going to run into that had more talent than they did, that was one of them. That was maybe one of the only ones, but that was one of them for sure that you could argue said, yeah, they've got a little touch more in their personnel than even UT does. And so I think that became clear. I think Ohio State was clearly the better team overall from start to finish, just taking in everything about that game. And if it was going to go wildly one direction, it was going to go in the wild direction of Ohio State winning that game big. But you pointed out a bunch of dumb penalties. They shot themselves in the foot, and I really thought, especially when Texas scored in the second quarter to tie it up, and looked like they were going to head into halftime tied up, this is exactly the way you drew it up if you're Texas, to be 7-7 at halftime, and then, you pop the Travion Henderson play, and that flips the narrative a little bit. So it was deflating, but, they were still tied up going to the fourth quarter, which – I don't know how many people expected that to happen, and I talked about it last week. I was like, man, and seeing all this talk about Ohio State blowing them out and this and that and how much better they were, I'll say this. People were right. Ohio State was better. I think they were clearly a better team, not like Texas sucks or nothing like that, but just like Ohio State was clearly a better team. And they could have probably, had they not had a penalty here or there, blown that thing open earlier on and been more of the game people were kind of alluding to last week.
Like when you say 27-10?
Yeah, not like crazy, but like being up, 24-10 at halftime or something, or 21-7 at halftime. And that would have felt much different than what, 14-7, and it's only 14-7 because Henderson popped the play. Otherwise, it's 7-7. Yeah, I could have seen the situation where they score maybe a couple more times, and it's 21-7 going into the locker room, and that would have felt very, very comfortable. But they let Texas hang around, and Texas also forced themselves to hang around by making some big plays, especially on defense, man. What did Ohio State really do offensively? They shut Jeremiah Smith.
You want me to answer that?
F
because
down.
They
popped the Henderson play, and there was maybe one or two other plays, but that was basically it. UT's defense played really well.
Yeah, I thought UT's defense played great. I did, and that's why it wasn't in the first half when Texas eventually tied the game up, and there was the throw to Jaden Blue. They gave him a chance to win the game, and the interception to start the first drive of the third quarter, you're like, okay. And sure enough, it was that way. Then it kind of just stayed there for a while, right? It just kind of stayed there for a while.
I just and I guess I never saw Texas play completely confident on offense. Not that Ohio State was either, but I just felt that they were more it just felt like they were more shook about it than I thought they would have been normally. And again, this does come down to me, to the fact that the one team that was slightly deeper than them, and they were the second deepest team in the country, was the one they were playing.
Well, that's one team that could, let's say you have two mafia groups to sit down at a table to discuss their turf war. Those two look at each other knowing both of them could obliterate the other if given the right opportunity.
Well, and that's what was said about Ohio State all along when they went out and they got Quinshawn Judkins and they went out and they got Caleb Downs. And what does he end up doing in that game? Making an absolutely massive play. And, the various others they went and got in the transfer portal. This was talked about as being the most talented team in college football from the very beginning of the year. Whenever you want to mark that, if you want to say that was last March, you want to say that was in August, you want to say that, it doesn't matter. Ohio State was the most talented team when you brought that topic up, and I think that's on full display from that game and throughout this entire run for them. And another thing about the playoff is they're getting hot at the right time, the same way Notre Dame did, but you look at them after that Michigan game, it's did they even make the playoff? They go beat Oregon and they win the Big Ten, so yes, they would have. But, real questions about the smaller playoff, how this would have been in other years. But I think because of the expanded playoff, we clearly, I think, have the two teams playing their absolute best, even though they're not healthy, especially in Notre Dame's case. But in terms of having earned their way here, you can't deny either one at this point. You might have said, well, Notre Dame's a little bit overrated when they got in the field or something, or Ohio State this. After these last 3 weeks, you can't sit there and say, well, they didn't deserve or they didn't belong no, these two teams deserve it. They've earned it. They belong in this spot.
Both have won 3 times, right? Both teams have had to win 3 games. That in itself against teams that were all really, really, really good. And Ohio State, when they obliterated Oregon, Tennessee was one thing, but when they crushed Oregon the way they did, no matter if the score looked closer than it was, I was like, my God, they're gonna looks like they're gonna run this table.
I was really surprised. Not surprised, but I was. Surprised is the word. Shocked certainly isn't the word. I was a little caught off guard maybe. And the reason why I'm struggling with this is because I know how good Ohio State's defense was, so I wasn't expecting Texas to run for 200 yards. But their complete inability to really run at all.
The last 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, I mean, that just really showed up huge and obviously was a major problem for Texas, as then everything is on Ewers basically, and, a play here and there, but there just wasn't much doing for them. And, that was just really a fun game, an awesome ending if you're an Ohio State fan, obviously, and just for neutral observers of college football who didn't have a dog in the fight. Like, I'm sitting there just watching that, thinking Texas is about to score here. We're about to get overtime in this mofo.
They're at the 1 yard line. How many plays are inside?
The whole
5
series of plays.
Yeah,
They ran all 4 plays and they got picked off on 4th down.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention the multiple penalties that kept giving them first downs down in that area. The 2 pass interference calls on that drive?
Back-to-back plays.
After Gunnar Helm had the dumb penalty, and that was taunting. That was stupid. You can't sit there and point at a guy.
Yep.
And it's kind of like, dude, you threw him like a rag doll. You really didn't need to prove anything else. He didn't need to be pointed at. He knew. You just shoved him like a pebble. But, after that, Texas had multiple opportunities, and Ohio State is great in the red zone. That was on full display. That was your put it in a trophy case, put it on the 24-hour reel in the visitor center or whatever on those TVs, and just replay that sequence there at the end, because that was really special stuff. And it felt like Texas was going to make this even more of a game. And then obviously, that defense bowed up and Jack Sawyer did what he did in one of the most incredible plays I've ever seen. That goes right up there with the kick six, Auburn, Alabama years ago. The band is on the field, whatever big moments you want to bring up, that's up there, fellas.
For a school that has much history, championships, massive plays, that's going to be a part of that. That's damn sure forever.
4th down, the spot, the national championship game, they're knocking on the doorstep, and you come up with a play like that to not only, knock it away from Ewers, but then to scoop and score. Did y'all know they were roommates, by the way? Did y'all know Quinn Ewers and
Yeah,
Jack
so were Colt
roommates?
McCoy and Shipley, right?
Yeah.
They get stuck on this one thing that is.
Well,
you hear what's funny? I didn't know that because I don't listen to the broadcast. I have it so low I can't even hear it.
Was at Ohio State long enough to go to the McDonald's across town.
Yeah.
To go to a second McDonald's. That's how long he was there. He wasn't there long enough for the Sawyer thing to mean anything as a roommate, other than they might as well have been at camp together.
Yeah. How many? By the way, the last 2 games, here's where Texas, and this came back to bite them, 59 carries for 111 yards in their last 2 games against Arizona State, and then that game against Ohio State. There was a moment there where they were able to grind it a little bit with Wisner, but not long. Now, let's get to this. R.J. Choppy joins us in 10 minutes on the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy. Let's get to that last drive. Let's get to the legacy of Quinn Ewers. I know he's the one that takes almost all of the heat here. Sarkisian's play calling. From the one, they went with their big back. Ran into us, and got to give I don't know what the graphic was about Ohio State red zone defense, but inside the 5 yard line. The pitch play to Wisner. Terrible play call, bad execution, both. Why not bring in Arch Manning? Let's kind of go over that moment on that pitch to Trey Wisner, who had no chance. Caleb Downs and Ransom, they were phenomenal on that play.
So you're talking. So first, they got the big Gunnar Helm play, and then they got the penalty.
They're
there.
down to the
then
1 yard line. They run. They're at
the they get all the way
first and goal at the one.
Yep. So Jarrett Gibson gets it for nothing, and then there's the toss play to Wisner, lost to 7, and you go from the 1 to the 8.
Let's discuss that play. Did that surprise you guys at all? Was that oh my God, what are they doing?
I'll tell you, I'm not going to pretend to be an X's and O's guy here. Sark had his rationale in the post game. Now, whether that's correct or not, that's for him to live with for the rest of his life. Me, novice, watching it. Terrible play call. Stupid play call. Why? Because I don't know any better, and I'm watching that just unfold, and obviously it didn't work. So, it was a bad play call. And I understand the logic behind tossing it backwards with that Ohio State defense and guys like Caleb Downs, who just sliced his way unblocked and blew that up. I guess based on the result, it was a bad play call. I did listen to Sark, and I kind of understood what he was trying to say there. But, the proof is in the pudding ultimately. And I don't know how you how you look at it any other way.
Was also to the short side of the field, which I hate.
Yeah.
On a pitch play. Butch used to get. I remember Butch, our old co-host, used to get mad about it because he'd say it's the damn sidelines, like right there. What are you doing? But Johnny Tusa said one time, "There's less people over there. The damn sidelines over there. You don't need more people." But I think it's just one of those things that I think he kind of outthought himself a little bit. Anytime you go outside and you're at the 1 yard line, I think it needs to be sort of an RPO, a bootleg, a naked bootleg, something that's misdirection as opposed to just a straight toss like they did to Wisner. I think you're better off so they only got stuffed once. When you get stuffed maybe twice, that's when you have to think about it. That was the thing was they didn't go back to the well at all right after that. And that's where I disagree with it. Running the pitch, like if you saw something you thought you could do, every coach does that on every single play that works or doesn't work, and it didn't in Caleb Downs. But I do think on the goal line like that, you can take Caleb Downs nearly out of the equation if you keep it tight and run up the middle, and then you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I don't know why you don't give it to Jarrett Gibson maybe in that situation. But we know with Trey Wisner, hey, let him get a little bit of open field and make a move and make one guy miss, and he's in the end zone, right? And that's probably part of the rationale. But, yeah, Sark's a great play caller, but he's not perfect, and clearly he wasn't perfect the other night, and that's a play call that will probably live with him for the rest of his life because that's maybe the play that cost you a national title for all we know.
It will if they don't ever win one.
Right. Yeah. That's why I say may. It might, and I'm sure it will for the foreseeable future, although you got to just move on and you can't just dwell on something like that. But, yeah, it's pretty clear the way that it worked out that was a bad play call. It changed the entire trajectory of that finish there and led to what unfolded after that because then you're throwing the football all of a sudden, whereas you were at the 1 yard line, you're now third and 7, and trying to make something happen.
Third and goal from the 7, yeah.
Yeah, so that flipped everything. So yeah, it's based on the result, a really bad play call, and I think most of the pundits that have spoken out since Friday night have pretty much been unanimous across the board. I have seen a couple people who do know their X's and O's at least try to justify the rationale or the thinking, but that doesn't mean the thinking was right, obviously, because it didn't work. So it wasn't a good call, and I'm sure if given that knowledge and the opportunity, he could have probably come up with something better. But, yeah, it is what it is, and you give Ohio State a lot of credit for just making the play because I don't know how many defenses make that play.
No.
How many teams how many teams got Caleb Downs running through there?
Nick Saban,
0?
I brought this up a couple of different times, said that he thought that Caleb Downs was the best player on their team last year. And he got beat a couple of times. He picked off the pass to seal it, end it. But that play where where you have Kelvin Banks, the best offensive lineman in college football, pulling out to the left, Downs goes behind him, and Ransom goes in front of him, beats him to the point. It was just two great players making a great play.
It was a great play. It was a great play by great players who are going to be playing on Sundays, going to be tie-in first-round draft picks. And so if you're playing – I don't know, who do I want to offend here? If you're playing like any other number of teams, they probably don't have a guy that makes that play 9 times out of 10. Ohio State does. And that's why they're Ohio State. So, I think that's part of the problem of that play call as well.
He's a dude, Caleb Downs, that's a where is he on every play kind of player. Right. And there's a couple guys on Ohio State you could make that argument for, but if I had to remind my quarterback, my offensive line, my tight ends, everybody to where's 2? You guys tell me where 2 is, and then that's we're going to go where he's not.
To me, that was way more of the factor than it was Sark's play call. You just got to tip your cap to talent and to great players making great plays, and that's to me what happened there with Ohio State's defense, and they've been very good. Among the best, if not the best, when it comes to having their backs against the goal line and having to come up with stops. And they did it right there, and that's why they're still playing for a national championship. But, yeah, Caleb Downs is a freak show. That was a massive get, and part of the reason why coming into the season everybody said Ohio State's the most talented team, Ohio State's the most talented team, Ohio State's the most talented team. And I think on Friday night, Ohio State looked like the most talented team in the country, going up against another team that's probably going to have about 10 NFL draft picks.
They're going to have multiple double digits, no question. And some guys that aren't even starters will play in the NFL. They'll reload. They are going to have to replace, man. When you get that kind of team they've had the last couple of years and you have that offensive line, they're reloading. They've got guys who are marinating. They'll be fine. They'll get who they need in the portal.
But I would say –
But now the quarterback position, it's Arch Manning, right? Moving forward, there's no question about that. And is he going to be as good as everybody thinks he's going to be, or was this kind of a fairy tale with him?
But I was going to say is, like, you think you're just going to reload and be back, but, like, were the wide receivers as good this year as they were last year?
No,
I don't think so.
No.
And they had a lot of really talented dudes and big portal pickups, and, Golden's off to the NFL draft now, but, like, so are they going to be, like, can you guarantee they're better next year? They're going to be, again, a little bit. So, like, this thing, you knocked on the door twice, not just knocked on the door, like you were, like, pushing the doorbell the last 2 years to get into the national championship house. And you fell short, like you stumbled on the doorstep and, broke your nose or something and never made it inside. And so while you would tend to believe in this environment that that's just going to be pretty much the case for Texas most years because they have as big a bankroll as anybody and as much opportunity as anybody and all that, like, there were areas of this team that weren't as good as last year. There were areas that were better as well, but you never know year to year. So I think it's unfortunate that that's how it ended for Quinn Ewers. I do think Texas is knocking, though, and I do think they're going to bust through. But, it's going to be Arch Manning next year. I don't think there's a question whatsoever about that. That's the most guaranteed thing you can predict in college football.
But if he is not the second coming of whoever could walk on water, he's a really good player, hell of an athlete. Big, physical, good arm, really great arm maybe, and we've seen what he can do with running the football. You just keep knocking on the door, man. The Oilers tried to do that in the 70s and couldn't beat the Steelers, 80s, 70s, and 80s, couldn't beat the Steelers when Bump Phillips said we're going to kick the door down. That never happened. You never know. You get close. I've brought this up so many times with Bobby Bowden and Tom Osborne, but keep knocking on the door. Next thing you know, it opens up, and then you have more and more opportunities to not just win one, but multiple. Man, they've been so close.
And I do believe that will happen with Sark if they just keep punching. I do think that they will maybe it's only one time, but I do think they're right there, and they just got to keep swinging and, just land a better combo next time. But, yeah, there's always the possibility that this is as close as they're going to come with Sark, or this is the closest they're going to come for a while. And this 12-team playoff, who the hell knows? I mean, they nearly got beat by Arizona State a couple weeks back. Some will argue they shouldn't even have been in that game on Friday night. They should have lost to Arizona State, right? So you never know. But, yeah, a brutal finish these last 2 years for Longhorns fans to be right there with a spot in the national title game and to come up just short, and a brutal ending for Quinn Ewers' career. It's like, how could it get worse than the fourth down stop and the fumble and the scoop and score? Let me come back and throw the interception and just have that be my last couple of –
Or think about how it ended against Washington. Throwing the ball in the end zone to try to go into overtime.
Right, so like that's the way it's ended for him, and that's going to kind of be some of your lasting memories. Not all, because he won a lot of big games, won titles and all that, but there will be an element of his legacy, especially, I heard somebody else say this, Quinn Ewers' legacy will be dictated by whatever Arch Manning does in so many ways. If Arch Manning wins a couple national titles, you're going to be like, oh, well, Quinn Ewers was a bum. He couldn't get it done. If Arch Manning can't win titles, then Ewers doesn't look as bad in hindsight.
They're not in position to where they were the last couple of years, though, in my opinion, and you can roast me or not, without Ewers being the guy that was their quarterback. There were at times you wondered about him, but he was very good. Lots of people around him, but I thought in the end he brought him back to where not just respectability, but to a level of knocking on the door to win a national title. It just did not work out for him. Some other quarterbacks, like Peyton Manning, didn't win one, and then all of a sudden Tennessee did win one. Paul, who was the quarterback? Tennessee?
T. Martin. Well,
T. Martin, right?
This guy knows.
I know,
who
R.J.
it was.
Choppy.
R.J. Choppy, the biggest Tennessee fan I've ever met in my life. Right there. You know what? One of my favorite things to do during Tennessee games when I'm watching is pull up RJ's Instagram or Twitter feed and watch him either be elated or totally melt down, which you are one of the more entertaining meltdowns I've ever seen in my life, RJ.
And that's just the ones I've posted. I have a few that are saved that I was not allowed to post. The lady saw them and she's like, nope. Not happening. And the one after the Florida Atlantic March Madness loss, that is without question my best one. I had so many good lines in there, and it only a select few people have seen it.
Well, next time we run into each other, I want to select.
I think we might see
you in New Orleans in a couple weeks,
possibly in New Orleans.
Yeah.
RJ,
book it. I'll show it to you.
I've told you this, and you know this. I've texted you a couple of times on my way either to work out or on the way home, I do drop in and listen to you guys, whether it's at 5:30 or whatever. I love the show with what you guys do, RJ, Sean, and also with Bobby Belt. But did you think that this was going to be today, that he's leaving, that he's no longer a part of the Cowboys? Did this surprise you?
It did. It surprised me today. We got the news, I guess 45 minutes, an hour after the show was over. Yeah, it surprised me. There's no doubt about it. I thought for sure that Mike Vrabel signing with New England, I thought that meant, hey, that was good news for McCarthy. I mean, that was one of the guys that maybe they were going to target. The longer this thing dragged out, the fact that they turned the Bears down, they told the Bears they can't interview him. I thought that was good news for Mike. But something changed here, and I know Jane Slater said on the Fan today that she thinks this was more McCarthy saying I'm done than Jerry saying get out. And that, I mean, again, that's a surprising aspect of this thing too, because a lot of the fans wanted Mike gone. I liked Mike. I thought Mike was fine. I didn't think he was the greatest coach in the world, but I thought he was a good coach, and you could absolutely win with him. But he had lost the fan base. And Jerry was going to bring him back, it appears. And Mike was the one that was like, yeah, this isn't going to happen for any number of reasons.
RJ, my number one reason about is Mike McCarthy. I buy that theory a lot because the Cowboys are never good enough to win the Super Bowl anymore. They're also not bad enough to really accept that they need to kind of look at the way they do things and rebuild. They're stuck in the middle, and having the 12th draft pick is kind of the evidence of that. But also last offseason and the salary cap situation they have right now would tell me, if I'm Mike McCarthy and you're telling me, hey, come back, we'll have a healthy Dak, we're going to go try and win a Super Bowl, you're going to be like, how? I mean, DeMarcus Lawrence likely gone. Zach Martin likely going to retire. You're going to re-sign Jordan Lewis? Don't have the cap space. Like, all these things that would make you think about coming back into a team with some stability, none of that's really there.
No, it's not. Look, they've got a quarterback that they're paying. Okay, they don't have an elite quarterback, but they got a quarterback that they like that they're paying. That's half the battle in the sport, right? It is half the battle, but you don't want to pay the wrong guy, and maybe Mike is like, well, I can't win here. They're not going to spend the money. The salary cap situation is what it is. They've only got like $11 million of cap space right now. They've got 3 top 100 picks. You got to hit on all of them. They are not deep. They have holes. They need players. They need players on offense and defense. I mean, I don't know that, like, if I'm McCarthy and you've got one chance left, right? Like, this is whatever contract he signs, wherever he goes, it's probably gonna be his last job. I mean, he's getting up there in age. Do you really want to stick around? And yeah, they're not getting any better quickly. The quickest way to get better is to be bad. They're still a couple of years away from being bad, like bad enough to be able to recoup and get a new quarterback and get more parts, another blue chip player.
Do you feel like you kind of mentioned this with McCarthy? Do you think he felt like he was getting used and just strung along by Jerry, who's done this before, even with players, and he just finally said, I don't want to be around this anymore? Or did he really love the job and want to stay in Dallas?
He liked the job. He loved the area. His kids are he's got a kid in high school. I think she's a sophomore. He or she, I don't know. But he likes he loved the fact that they were the schools they were in. He really loved the area. I think he liked the job. I think there's things about the job he didn't love. But look, that's this job. And whoever takes this job next, they've got to understand that. Like, this is not an operation like anything else in the sport. Maybe anything else in sports. It's on, the Yankees and the Cowboys and the Lakers just operate in a different world of coverage and prestige and importance and type of, like, they're all family owned and they all operate in their own way. And you've got to deal with that. And Mike figured it out, but there are things about this job I don't think he loved. And we'll see who the next person is. That's why I do think that generally you want somebody here who's been here. Garrett had been here before, right? He knew the ropes, and he was able to deal with it.
So if that, and that was gonna be my next question of the likelihood of someone who hasn't been there compared to someone who has, that would make someone like Kellen Moore a top candidate. But who else fits that bill of guys who could come in to be this head coach who have been there?
All right, so I mean, Kellen fits the bill. I wouldn't surprise me if Jason Witten wasn't in here. Other than that, like there's not really any guys out there that would fit that have coached before. Jerry has said to us in the past when they were hiring McCarthy, he told us that he did not want someone like a Lincoln Riley that had to learn on the job. He didn't want somebody who had never coached in the NFL before. All right, so I'll just take his word. That's 5 years ago. So unless he's changed his mind, that would rule out Kellen Moore. That would rule out Jason Witten. It would rule out Sark, Kirby Smart, whoever. So now you're down to John Gruden and Doug Peterson and Ron Rivera and Pete Carroll. Like, are we – I could see Gruden. I mean, I really could. I could see Pete Carroll, Belichick if they want to pay the buyout. But you don't have a whole lot of guys that have been around here that are head coaches.
And RJ, they also look, if you're talking, they're paying the quarterback. So for two, they can't do anything, that's not built around Dak for at least 2 years and likely 3. So everything you do has to be built around Dak. Are you going to, run it out there and do it with a Ben Johnson, who I know everybody wants in Dallas? All the fans would love to have Ben Johnson. It would be great. But with that just being in the owner and GM's head, it's just so unlikely to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, here's the issue with Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson wants, equal say. Mm-hmm. He wants an alignment of owner, GM, head coach. You're not going to get that here. Now, the idea that Jerry is just this overlord that rules with an iron fist, I mean, that's not it. That's not true. The head coach here has a lot of power. But Ben Johnson, I think, wants it more of what Mike Tomlin has at Pittsburgh, where the GM basically works for him. I think that's what Ben Johnson's looking for. And he's picky, and he can be picky because he's got a great job and he's making a good money, and I'm sure he likes the team he's coaching for. Why wouldn't you? And that's why he can be picky with whatever job he wants. That's not going to happen here. It's just the reality of it. That's the reality of the situation.
How much does it burn? There are 8 teams, RJ, left in the playoffs, and 2 of them are from the NFC East. One of them is a team that then had this fight with now over the last few years, Philadelphia. And now here comes Washington with what looks like it's different than the 2012 RG3 spark with Jaden Daniels and what they've done, even though Detroit might, mop them up Saturday.
Right. I mean, look, if Philadelphia, if Washington goes and beats Detroit this weekend, I mean, I don't know, man. I don't know how Jerry even wakes up from that. That'd be a nightmare of epic proportions. This is a Cowboys team that's been dying to get back to the conference championship, and in 1 year, the guy that was their DC goes and does it, and Washington did it the right way. They stunk. They drafted a quarterback. And, the best time, the easiest time to win in this league, the cheat code is what Washington has. It's to have the free quarterback. That's the cheat code in this sport. And, unless you have Patrick Mahomes, you're going to struggle, and we'll see what happens, when all the money from Josh Allen and Jared Goff, when they actually hit, right? When that money actually hits, what that does to those rosters, because those are good rosters. At least Detroit's is really, really good. But, the Cowboys are in a situation where, Dak's already been paid. His money's already hit. CD's money's already hit. And now you're starting to have to make cuts. And now you're in a situation where you got to sign Micah, and you got limited cap space this offseason.
RJ, you talk to Jerry every week. And most weeks he's really happy with you guys. Some weeks he gets really mad. Once in a while, it gets to him.
That was greatness.
But do you get the sense that he has never, because they've never had that period, that he's never really accepted who they actually are and thinks they still are something else because they've never done a complete rebuild?
Well, I do think that this is part of Jerry being Jerry. One, he doesn't want to do a rebuild because he has said, I don't have time for a bad time. He's older.
Yeah.
You're in your 80s. You don't know what you got tomorrow. I understand him not wanting to rebuild. It's not in the best interest of the organization to do what they're doing. I get it. It's his team. It's his toy box or sandbox, whatever. Go ahead. But, I think Jerry generally talks up the roster more than it is. I think this roster is always a little bit overrated. And, Jerry always looks at it, and it's never the player's fault. It's always the coach. I mean, think about it. Since Jimmy left, he's run through Barry and Chan and Campo and Bill and Wade and Jason and now Mike. It's never the players. It's never the player's fault because he picks the players. So it can't be their fault. Otherwise, that would be him telling you that he screwed up. And I do think that plays into it a little bit. I mean, I don't think Jerry's an egomaniac, but I also think that he guards his desk like he actually has to guard his desk. He's the owner of the team. He doesn't protect his job. He's the owner, but he does. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, if anybody could say I screwed up, it's him.
College football question. Appreciate you joining us today. We have obviously Notre Dame and Ohio State. It's been I've enjoyed it. Yeah, there's been back and forth of how it could be run differently or whatever. I know you're a Tennessee Vol fan, and Ohio State smoked them to open this up. Did you, when you saw that, say, okay, this is Ohio State that might win the whole thing?
I mean, the team that beat us, nobody beats them. That team was on a different level, and they've continued it. I don't know if that game that they played against us was their best game. Maybe the Oregon game was, but the team that beat us, I mean, they were on a different level that night. And I think one thing I learned from this college playoff, and you could talk and you could argue about seeding and all this stuff. The one thing that stood out more than anything is that home field advantage in college football is more powerful than just about anything else. It is not, in the NFL, they say it's 3 points or whatever. I mean, you could give 15 to 20 points for a home field advantage. If you flipped all those, I don't know that Penn State is going to struggle at SMU. I mean, they're limited. It's not a great home environment. But like, how different would Texas Clemson be if it was in Clemson? How different would Ohio State Tennessee be if it was in Knoxville? Like, those are different environments. Home field matters. And now I think Texas still wins and Ohio State still wins, but they wouldn't have been 2-score, 3-score games, I don't think. But it has been tremendous. The BCS got it right a lot, but this is more fun. It just is.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate your time. I guess you can't wait to get on the show tomorrow, huh?
I don't know what we're going to talk about. I mean, it might be McCarthy. You never know.
Maybe drop that in.
Is Jerry tomorrow?
No, Jerry is. He won't be joining us until probably the week after the draft.
Okay. Yeah.
What?
Well, he's on vacation.
Oh,
now.
yeah.
It's over. Once the season's over, we're done.
That's right. Has he said anything publicly today about McCarthy? Has he been in front of the media?
The statement that was said.
Oh, okay.
Just a statement.
That's it.
I don't think he'll speak. He'll speak. Next time he speaks probably will be when they hire somebody.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it. Good
Have
friend,
a good one,
RJ
guys.
Choppy, 105.3 The Fan, with us on the Jerry Jones Dallas Cowboys looking for a head coach, which will, instead of the stories being about is McCarthy coming back, now the stories will be who will be the head coach.
I'm going to tell you right now.
You going to do a top 5 on that today?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I am. If John Gruden is the head coach or Doug Peterson, I want you to take this. Actually find the heaviest one.
I thought you were about to recommend Neil Brown for the Cowboys head coaching job.
I want you to take this, or the heaviest helmet we have in here, or heavy thing. We have baseball
I think that Nebraska one's really heavy.
Right, yeah, the heaviest one we have in here, and I want you to beat me over the head with it. I want you to hit me so hard that I don't remember things.
We're not going to hire Doug Peterson. He just got fired by the Jaguars. Like, that wouldn't fly whatsoever.
I keep hearing that name thrown around, and
dude, he got fired by the Jaguars.
Well, but why would you hire a coach who calls his own plays? You just had that.
Yeah, and
who also had a Super Bowl like Peterson.
I buy into the theory that this was McCarthy going, like, what do you really want out of this? And their roster, I could go through and there are guys that I would keep, and then they have a bunch of guys that because they have a blue star and they have this kind of hype machine, they're like, oh, man, we love this one. And it happens quite a bit, but you could, if they had if they had a higher draft pick, if they had the first pick in every single round this year, if they were 1 in 16 in the first pick, there's not a position on the field because you need more than one wide receiver. There's not a position on the field, even quarterback, that I would say worth a look at somebody else. And if you have that scenario, then I think you're in a rebuild and you don't know it.
Well, I think it's interesting that McCarthy is clearly tired of the BS. I mean,
he
was tired.
So.
He's over it, and I don't blame him one bit for just being like, you know what, I'm doing what I can do. Like, I'm over this. I'll go do it somewhere else. Because just last week, was it the Bears that were wanting to interview him, or who was it?
Chicago asked,
Bears,
and Jerry said
so,
no.
like, there's teams that are clearly, like, they think he's good enough to at least kick the tires off.
The Saints, too, I think are going to
have so, like, if you have opportunities, I'm sure he's got more behind-the-scenes info on, like, how genuine that interest is. Then if that's the case and there are teams that are good chances to hire you, why not get the hell out of Dallas? I'd love, go get Steve Spagnuolo, please, so we can get him the hell out of Kansas City and try to, like, bring this dynasty down a little bit. I love Patrick Mahomes, but, like, let's make this entertaining and competitive. But no, I mean, Spagnuolo's got other job interviews, obviously, and I hope somebody hires him because I just want to see, just take a piece out of the Jenga block that is the Kansas City Chiefs right now, even though I'm sure they'd find a way to be even better somehow or another.
Yeah.
But, no, I mean, he's a guy that's out there. They're definitely not going to hire Doug Peterson. I mean, I'll eat this note in front of me if they end up doing that when the time comes. But Kellen Moore's interesting. I mean, that is very interesting. And you also take a little bit of an oomph out of Philadelphia at the same time. So that's one name that would get me a little bit interested.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I know a lot of people be like, oh, he had Saquon Barkley. You know who else had Saquon Barkley for the whole career until
the New York
this year?
Football Giants.
The Giants, and they didn't win anything with him. And it wasn't because there would be whole games against the Cowboys where Saquon Barkley would go like 40 minutes without between touches, like of real time. And you're like, hey, is he hurt? Like, no. They just keep forgetting to give him the ball. Yeah. Like, what are you doing? And the Eagles are like, Kellen Moore's like, hey, I got an idea. You know, we got this guy. He's like a monster. You know what we're going to do? We're going to give him the ball a lot.
In any way.
Yeah.
Get it out, throw it out of the backfield.
So much that he's basically taking knees to not break the NFL record. Now, granted, he's played in more games during the season, so I kind of respect that. But then yesterday, he could have ran for a long touchdown, decided
70
to just
yards,
slide and run the clock out. Like, he seems like a very good teammate, and I was surprised. I thought the Cowboys and McCarthy were just going to keep it moving based on the fact that he wasn't one of those, like, initial names that we heard, and typically it feels like that's in those first few days, those names come out. But a little bit of a delay, and here we are, and you know, I think it's probably time for a fresh start once again for the Cowboys. But, man alive, the longer it goes on, this drought, I mean, it's still Jerry's world and it's still the star and it's still all these things. But, man, the farther we get away from, like, 1995, you know, there's less of that feeling as impactful as it once did. And so, it'll be a highly coveted job. But there is that part of working for Jerry Jones that makes it less appetizing than it probably should be.
You want to call him now? Or
we take a break first.
Take a break. We'll get another perspective on this. Todd Archer from ESPN on the Jerry Jones looking now for a head coach.
I wanted to make one mention on the NFL declarations because I do want to talk a little bit more about those, but we did fail to mention that Penn State's bringing back both of their running backs. We did not mention that.
Yeah, you said that before the show. I couldn't believe it.
Denai Dennis Sutton is also coming back.
Is he coming back too?
He's coming back, and he's a beast.
Yeah, well, good for them. Good. Yeah. I love it. I love it when you get the good news that the guys that could touch, you know, tip their toes in the water of the NFL decide they want to come back and try to finish it differently.
Yeah, we mentioned some of the Texas guys at the top, but yeah, Katron Allen and Nick Singleton both announcing that they're coming back, so that's absolutely massive for the Penn State backfield. And, you know, we'll see on Drew Aller. He obviously didn't leave a great lasting impression.
No, he's already said he was coming back, and that's why Bo Prabula left, so I wouldn't expect that to change.
Well, I mean, like, in terms of how well he plays next year. Yeah, no, he's coming back, but just how well he plays next year. But that's absolutely massive news for the Nittany Lions, so I wanted to mention that because I don't know when we'll get another spot, too.
Well, they may need even better news if Tom Allen – no, they'll find somebody, but Tom Allen possibly going to Clemson's a huge story to watch, too. When we come back, it's about – in fact, that's all but waiting for the official announcement. Todd Archer, ESPN, covers the Cowboys in the NFL playoffs. We are mainly college football core, but this is a big story, obviously, and we'll look at kind of in a college football way of who's left in the playoffs, the NFL playoffs, including Garrett's favorite former Arizona State quarterback, Jaden Daniels with the Redskins Commanders. This is 365 Sports. Ideal MRI in the Central Texas marketplace just off of I-35 in Waco. Ideal MRI, state-of-the-art imaging machine to get the what you need when it comes to an MRI, to get what you need when your shoulder is hurting. And it's more than just something you may have tweaked like I've done with my left shoulder blade. Maybe it's your knee. Maybe it's your lower back. If your doctor wants a better look and wants another look, MRI, Ideal MRI in the Central Texas marketplace can get you what you need. And, oh, by the way, $497 or less. And that's an incredible deal when the average MRI is over $1,100. IdealMRI.com.
In Texas, there's pea-size hail and baseball-size hail. Guess which one hit our house? We didn't even know where to begin, but we called our Texas Farm Bureau insurance agent, and he was so reassuring. He knew exactly what to do to get our house back into shape and our lives back to normal. Now, we're even more thankful for the roof over our heads.
Stop by and see our agents at one of our 3 McLennan County locations.
Coverage and discounts are subject to qualifications and policy terms and may vary by situation.
At Ideal MRI, we feel blessed to be part of the Waco community. We're a small family business here in Central Texas. At times like this, the cost of healthcare has never been more important. And unfortunately, significant illnesses and injuries still occur. And that's why Ideal MRI is open and here to serve you through this difficult time. So if you need an MRI, ask your doctor about Ideal MRI. You can schedule online in minutes at idealmri.com or call 833-IDEAL-MRI.
When you work with a bank, you should expect the best of everything. That includes face-to-face personal service and the kind of community banking care that only comes from one neighbor to another. That's exactly what you'll get from the First National Bank of Central Texas, where you will know your banker works just as hard as you do. Once again, that's the First National Bank of Central Texas. Settle for nothing less than the first. Member FDIC.
Baylor alumni are more than 160,000 strong. When we all join hands to support our university, we don't just move the needle, we move mountains. Working together, we create life-changing opportunities for students on the field, in the classroom, in the laboratory, and in life for generations to come. So get connected, get involved. Learn how at baylor.edu/alumni.
This is 365 Sports, powered by Sikkim365.com. This segment is brought to you by Bud Light. Enjoy the smooth, crisp taste of Bud Light beer. Easy to drink, easy to enjoy.
Story today earlier, Mike McCarthy out as head coach of the Cowboys. Todd Archer in every way, all a part of it from ESPN, joins us on 365 Sports. Been a busy day, Todd. Thank you very much for your time, finding time. So whose decision was this?
Yes. I mean, ultimately, let's be honest, it's Jerry's decision, right? Because he can do what he wants to make the guy not be the coach, or to want to be the coach. But I do think McCarthy had some say in this as well. And when there wasn't, say, longer-term protection for him and the staff, he just decided, you know what, let's just move another way. Jerry and Jerry agreed. And maybe in some respects, Jerry made him an offer he could refuse, and he did refuse it. And we'll see where everything goes. I'm not saying that Jerry wanted to move on from Mike McCarthy, but I think there were conditions that he had in place that he was non-negotiable on, and then it just kind of led him down this path because Smoak as of, today's Monday, all these days run, say Friday, right? I think if you had to ask a lot of people in that building if Mike will be back, they would have said on Friday, it's looking like he'll be back, yeah. So here you are, and now Jerry's looking for a coach. So shows how quickly things can change.
Todd, if you had to make a candidate list right now, is Kellen Moore at the top of the list or just on it?
I'm not going to handicap the field and say put this guy first, second, third, fourth, fifth, all that. But he's definitely, I would say, on it. Obviously, he's got a background here with the Cowboys. Jerry just made Dak Prescott the highest paid player in NFL history. We've heard him say he wants to make things Dak friendly and support the quarterback, and that's the priority, right? Why wouldn't Kellen Moore be on the list? Doesn't mean he's the favorite or he's absolutely getting the job. The one thing that I've been told today was this thing could drag on past the Super Bowl. So add on the names of the guys that could be it, and theoretically Kellen Moore could be one of those guys. But, you know, they can't talk to Ben Johnson, Aaron Glenn, Steve Spagnuolo, Matt Nagy this week because they didn't talk to those guys last week. But they can do Zoom interviews no longer in 3 hours this week with the guys who are still alive in the playoffs. A guy like Kellen Moore, and pick whoever else you would want to pick. So I'm trying to figure out the right way to say this. This search will be far different than the last search when all he did was interview Mike McCarthy and Marvin Lewis for the job.
Yeah, they scratched that one itch with Marvin Lewis, right?
Yeah, and look, Stephen Jones has a long relationship with Marvin from their competition committee days and all that. So, and Marvin, you look at Marvin's success that he had in Cincinnati, and I don't mean that as a backward slight, but I covered the Bengals. I know what that franchise was like, and I know what he turned it into. So that was, that I could have seen the Cowboys going in that direction, but ultimately the best part of that whole search was they interviewed Mike McCarthy and Marvin Lewis before making any announcement on Jason Garrett's status.
It's easy to say this, but I do believe it. Jerry loves this, right?
I can't say this is the answer I can give you on everything regarding Jerry. I can't say no. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could pick out the wildest names in the world as who could be the head coach of the Cowboys, and there was always like 1 scintilla % that you would say, yeah, I can see Jerry doing that. So yeah, I can see Jerry loving this, or maybe not loving it, but maybe the better way of saying it is not minding this, even if the perception doesn't always match the reality. The perception is the perception, and if you're making this move without knowing who your next coach is going to be, then it seems like you have no plan. And now maybe we'll wake up tomorrow and we'll hear, or we'll hear in a couple hours that they put in a request for these guys and they'll have a new coach by Friday. All possible, maybe not probable. And that would tell you they did have a plan. But I will say this. I'm not of the mind that the Cowboys did wrong last week by denying Mike McCarthy permission to speak to the Bears. He was under their contractual control. So they didn't have to let him go. And anybody who has a contract probably understands that to a degree. And I'll say this, the Bears still haven't hired anybody. So theoretically, Mike McCarthy could talk to them tomorrow and become their next head coach. So he didn't miss out on anything, I guess is what I'm saying. And I think there was a segment of the media nationally or whatever that was making Mike McCarthy into some kind of martyr because of Jerry denying him that permission to talk to the Bears last week. Nothing's changed. He can talk to him now. He's still in the same position that he would have been last week.
Todd, the state of the roster, I don't think has been fairly evaluated by the Cowboys. Yeah, I mean, maybe ever since the last Super Bowl, but certainly not in the Romo/Dak era. And I feel like they clearly got bailed out by Romo's career is over, and they got Dak, who can kind of pick up the slack and run and make the playoffs and do at least exactly what they were doing before. No more, only a little bit less sometimes, like when he's been hurt. So they're at least status quo. Has that clouded Jerry's judgment that they have not had consecutive seasons of just driving the car straight off the road to make them think like maybe we need to change things?
I don't even think they needed to have that happen because they're not going to change things. So it's a question that Jerry was asked directly after the Washington game. Will you change who the general manager is? No. Person who writes the checks matters most. And why would I give that up? I didn't buy the Cowboys just to let my kids run it. It's my occupation, all that stuff. So fans can be upset and frustrated and say what they want about it. The question that they never seem to think we ask has always been asked and always been answered. They just don't like the answer. I'd argue that the roster, look, if we're going back to the Romo time, the 2007 roster was one of the best rosters the Cowboys have had since certainly in those Super Bowl runs. 13 Pro Bowlers, and they were legit guys, not just injury replacement dudes. That was a team that blew its window. The 14 Cowboys, maybe they didn't have the defense, but certainly they had an opportunity to do something in the playoffs and had it taken away on the dead catch. The 16 Cowboys certainly had an opportunity at home as the number one seed in the NFC and had a chance to get to a Super Bowl and ultimately didn't because they couldn't cover, they couldn't stop Aaron Rodgers. And then a couple years, last year, geez, that's how it goes. 2023, they're down 27-0 the Packers when they're the number 2 seed, and you're thinking, okay, this could be a year where they make their run. So I hear what people say when the roster isn't as good as we think it is. I'd argue that they've had multiple opportunities to do more than they've done, and they failed for whatever reason, coaching, maybe they're missing key pieces that they're in the roster. But in Jerry's mind, he's doing a bang-up job.
Todd, I asked R.J. Choppy this question. That's
your first mistake. Do that.
You know what? You weren't available. No, I'm kidding. But Washington won last night. It could have gone either way. They have this young phenom quarterback. Well, they had one about 12 years ago, and that didn't go very well at the end with RG3. Philadelphia is so well run. Whether they keep winning or not in the postseason, I don't know. But they just seem like they're really, really well done. Their passing attack seems to be stagnant. How much would it just burn Jerry that even Washington's involved in this among the final 8? Or does that even register with him?
I think it registers because he looks and he sees that he had Dan Quinn here for 3 seasons and really likes him and paid him a lot of money to not go and take head coaching jobs the same way he did with Sean Payton and Mike Zimmer a generation ago, right? And even with Jason Garrett, when Garrett could have left after the 07 or 08 season to Baltimore, Atlanta, those years. So I think it burns him and bothers him. Saying Kellen Moore in Philadelphia, seeing Saquon run for 2,000 yards when Kellen was a guy that no one thought would run the ball. And obviously they did run the ball. I think it bothers him, and I think that's why you hear Jerry now say things like, I regret firing Wade Phillips because Wade went to Denver and won a Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
The Cowboys in 2010 were 1-7 and were just a train wreck. Like, why would you regret that? Regretting the Chan Gailey move after the 2 playoff seasons. That roster was bad, and they were 8-8, 9-7, whatever the heck those teams were when they made the playoffs. That was not a team that was built to make runs. So why would you regret it? I think here's what I'm curious about. We know Netflix has a documentary coming out, right? It's America's Team, The Gambler and His Cowboys. The Gambler, Jerry Jones. That's what we always say. Can someone tell me the last time he made a gambling move?
When he hired Jimmy. No, Barry Switzer. I'll give him Barry Switzer. After that, none. Never. Ever.
Well, I'll go T.O. That was a gambling move. That was an all-in. I'm just going on my time here. Here's obviously before that they passed on Randy Moss. But the notion that the Cowboys and Jerry are gamblers and take these chances, that's not the case. And that's, I'm not saying they got to go and spend at the high end of the free agent market and bring in the top guys, because I don't think that's the best way to build your team either. But there's in between doing basically next to nothing, which is what they did this past offseason when they lost guys and didn't properly replace them.
Well, Todd,
Joey Galloway be a part of that?
No.
Yeah,
Maybe.
Yeah,
Joey Galloway.
I think it's in the discussion.
Roy Williams.
Yeah.
Okay, so he has for wide receivers occasionally, and T.O. and Amari. He's 50-50. T.O. and Amari Cooper paid off, and Joey Galloway and Roy Williams didn't. But yeah, Todd, they're paralyzed by their misunderstanding of the salary cap, and I feel like they're trying to build for a dynasty now when, unless you have Mahomes, you don't really have one. So why not just, I guess they want to build for a future that's never coming, and they're so afraid of the cap when, look, you just got to, you missed with Romo, and you're about to miss with Dak if you don't. When you have that window, you just got to maximize it and then worry about it later. They just don't seem to do that, do they?
I'd agree with that. And look, their approach isn't wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not, that's not the right way to say that, Todd. Their approach isn't completely incorrect. Mm-hmm. Because we have seen teams with boatloads of cap space just throw money at guys and they still lose games, right? So how they want to roster build is the right way. My argument to them is, at some point, if you're going to go, say you're all in, be all in. The Rams have been a team that went from F them picks and going and winning a Super Bowl and going all in and making a quarterback trade and all that stuff, to everybody that, okay, they're going to be done now. I believe they're playing tonight in the playoff game in Arizona against the Vikings. I believe they were in the playoffs again last year. So you can do it. The Eagles are a team with how they structure things and what they do and how they pay their guys. So you can do it. Might there come a day where you're going to pay the piper? Absolutely, probably so. But you know what? I think if you made the moves that a Philly made, a Rams made, pick another team, that whoever you want to pick, right? Buffalo going and doing the things that they've done, although they had to scale back. That if you make the effort and you fall short, I think fans would almost be more receptive to that than just kind of hitting and hoping. And there seems to be a lot of hitting and hoping with the Cowboy strategy.
Todd, you cover the entire league. I know you cover the Cowboys, but you've been around, as you said, with other places. What do other either owners or those in the NFL who make decisions, general managers and others, think of the Cowboys, of who they are now?
I think they see a roster that's pretty good, that has some holes in it. And I'll go back to what Parcells said when he came here. This is the big room. You want to play the big room. It's still the Cowboys. It's still the big room. I think that still resonates with a lot of people that I talk to across the league and what they are and what they can be. And I don't think Jerry's so much of a deterrent of keeping people away from coming here. Maybe on the coaching and personnel side of things is probably the best way to think of that, as some people might think, because as much as we get frustrated or people get frustrated by Jerry, he's not a guy when he's in the draft room, when he looks at Will McClay and Will says, I think you need to take Smokey, and the head coach says, I think you need to take Smokey, and Stephen Jones says, I need to take Smokey, and then he says, nah, you guys are wrong, I'm taking Paul. He doesn't do that. He is a guy that is going to listen and make decisions that way, and I think with a guy like Will McClay, they have one of the better. Their drafts have been good. Probably, if you map them out against the other teams in the league, certainly in the top half of the NFL. And they've had misses. I know you're going to throw Mozzie Smith or something back at me, but I think they do that well. But I think when people look at the Cowboys and that I talk to across the league, they don't see Jerry as a deterrent as to why they wouldn't want to come here and work for the Cowboys. And I think the perception of Jerry just doing whatever he wants is kind of overplayed as well.
Okay. Paul, anything else?
Nope.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it. I know you have
you got it, guys.
You're not done you are with us, but I know you got a lot to do. Todd Archer with us, ESPN, back-to-back segments with those on the Mike McCarthy and Cowboys story. McCarthy out, Cowboys coaching search begins. One thing, RJ, I believe it was RJ, I kind of both of them run together with me on their information, but this is going to play out as long as he wants it to be.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, there was that unwritten rule that you're not supposed to announce a head coaching change during or hiring during the Super Bowl week. That's gone. Jerry would love to carry it all the way into that week.
Well, the thing is, if he wants to interview anybody who winds up in that,
you got to have to wait that long anyway.
He's going to have to wait that long anyway.
Yep.
So,
yep. All right. It's 3:48. We appreciate all of you who are part of the show today.
It's not.
What?
It's not 3:48.
5:48.
It is in California. If you're watching us in California right now, it's 3:48.
It's I don't think I'm getting older.
No, you're only as old as you feel, Smoak.
You know, I what did I say? Sawyer Warren, is the one who ran back the fumble.
I'll get some nice brochures of a good facility. We'll put a camera up in there. You can do the show with us. We'll just make sure you're taken care of.
I do want to say this. Stop. Hey, Steve, and I'm not just hey, Steve, Jerry's still messing with another man's livelihood. No excuse for it.
I mean, he's not. I mean, he could still get the Bears job. He could still get the Saints job. I mean, you hate on Jerry for a lot of things, and, that's fine. They had the contractual window. Mike McCarthy decided he didn't want to do it, but he didn't. He wasn't going to interview for the Patriots, and the Patriots are the only one, I think, who's actually hired somebody so far. So,
do you think we'll ever really know that if McCarthy's the one that said, screw it, I'm done?
Only years from now. But I'm pretty sure it was, because this was not because Jerry could have made the big scene of see, he's gone. I think this caught Jerry a little bit. He doesn't usually lose negotiations.
No, I mean, he usually just bullies his way into what he wants.
Yeah. Deion as Cowboys head coach is going to be crazy. That's going to be amazing.
Again,
there'll be a report about that.
That would be a risk. That would be a gamble.
Well, I had it in the notes that Deion, there was talk about him having interest in
the Raiders.
A Raiders job, but
that was
kind of got extinguished pretty quickly. So,
because he said he wants to coach his sons, plural. And the only way he can make that happen for sure is if he was the coach of the Titans.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just something to keep an eye on with him. Just his name's always going to be in the mix because it gets more clicks. So people are going to mention him even if there's no reason to mention him. But he was mentioned in one report there, and I'm joking about Dallas. Obviously, they're not going to go that direction. But, yeah, I hope Deion's at Colorado. I expect that he will be the way it stands right now. But could get interesting just in terms of the dominoes and how they fall. Who gets involved and what jobs that opens up. That's always kind of the fun part is what did this domino create that suddenly now Iowa State needs a head coach? And I don't think Matt Campbell's getting an NFL job, but just the way things can kind of turn from one thing to another. We'll see, because there are a handful of jobs that are still open right now. But, the Cowboys one definitely is going to be the most talked about, along with, the Jets probably, right? The Jets will be pretty widely talked about. Chicago, to some extent, but the Cowboys job, that's going to be a pretty big deal.
The Jets, they have their, but they're so gone from all this and
I don't
so
mean
misrun.
I don't mean a big deal as in people are going to be like, oh wow, the Cow. I just mean a big deal in terms of it's going to be talked about a lot, because I don't think that it's the job that everybody goes gaga over any longer. I think the whole Jerry thing has sort of tainted that to some extent for anybody who would have interest in that job. I think it's just happened so many times now that it's unavoidable to come to any conclusion other than, he's made that job less than it was just a few years ago, and not as enticing as it was just a few years ago.
Yeah.
Garrett Ross is running the ship today, as he does here on 365 Sports. Emery Winter dialing up already, editing what we have for 365 Sports tonight at 10:30 tonight on the CW. Coming up, Paul Catalina and his top five.
Richard Carr, Buick GMC Cadillac, they are the people that you can count on for great customer service, for great prices on vehicles, both new and pre-owned. Whatever you are looking to get done with your car this winter season, they can hook you up over at Richard Carr, Buick GMC Cadillac, and that includes, as I said, great offers. Like right now at the New Year New Ride Savings Event, all 2024 cars and trucks being priced to move. Bring in your trade and make an offer on the dozens of vehicles they have between the 2024 trucks and SUVs on the lot. Bring that trade in, make an offer, and you could be riding home in a brand new vehicle for yourself and a lot more peace of mind. And, man, it's a new year. Want to get some new things done. So why not get into a new car during the new year, new ride savings? So, yeah, show up, bring in your used car. That's a way to get it done. But right now you can also save $11,000 straight up on a 2024 GMC Sierra SLT with the qualified trade-in. If you want to drive something a little bit different, something with some excitement, but no gasoline bills, they also have the electric Cadillac Lyriq, a must-drive. You will see and feel the difference over everyday EVs instantly. You can come by and test drive the Lyriq today at Richard Carr Cadillac. So trade in, get a sprawling lot full of cars and trucks that you can look through, including the Cadillac Lyriq. But also, if you need to get your car worked on, they can hook you up with that as well with their award-winning service department. So get your year started right in a new ride at the New Year New Ride Savings event, or get your current vehicle up to tip-top shape for the new year over at Richard Carr. Locally owned, locally run, and a part of the community for over 40 years. Do business in Waco and Central Texas with a dealership who gives back to Baylor and the Waco community. Deal with people you can count on at Richard Carr, Buick, GMC, Cadillac.
For a wheeled cooler, this is the Arctic 52-quart ultralight wheeled cooler. I hauled it on a deck, I hauled it downstairs, upstairs, grass, gravel, sandy road, mud puddles, the whole bit. And I gotta say, it is pretty darn tough. I really do like the wheels and the tow handle. It's easy to hold on to, even when full. They've made it 6 full days with ice present, still keeping cool enough temperatures to keep drinks cold. This is a great cooler. And if you're looking for a new wheeled cooler that tows really nicely, this is a great option.
If your business is like most, you need things done quickly. But if you're still tying your critical applications together on multiple shared public networks, you've probably been feeling the slowdown. And that's no good for business. A private UPN fiber network can get you and your business moving at the speed of light. Whatever you need, we can build it. Internet, Metro Ethernet, Waves, dark fiber. We deliver custom private networks and are focused on business customers only. Our next generation 100% fiber optic infrastructure offers you low latency and ultra scalable bandwidth with speeds up to 100 gigabit to run your critical applications. Your connection won't be limiting your performance anymore. It's diverse and scalable, so it can grow and change as your business grows and changes. And with a secure carrier-grade private network, you'll have all the reliability you need. Contact UPN today to learn more. Fast just got faster.
There are hundreds of things that can affect our sleep, but what's affecting yours? Sleep Doctor's Home Sleep Test brings the precision of a sleep lab into the comfort of home to help you get answers and unlock a lifetime of great sleep. Start now at sleepdoctor.com/TV.
Time for Paul Catalina's Top 5, brought to you by Texas Beef House. Where's the best beef in Texas? Your house when you order from Texas Beef House. Unleash the flavor of Texas raised Wagyu. From our pasture to your plate, TexasBeefHouse.com.
Sup? It's the Monday Top 5, Paul Catalina. That's me. And look, we don't normally do NFL topics here, but we're shaking things up in the new year on the top 5. And look, I'm an expert about a great many things, but one of them, I have complete confidence, and Garrett, please back me up here. And not just because I said this, and if you don't agree with me, I'll punch you in the kidneys. But I feel like I'm a pretty good expert on the Cowboys.
I'd give you that.
I'm very fair. I'm not a homer. I've covered them. I see that. The lawnmower and weed eater you hear out right now is really my burning rage at how things have not gone the right way and how they always kind of pick this time to mow our lawn. But number 5, best contenders for the Cowboys head coaching opening. And some of these are not very inspired. But you know why? Because I know the Cowboys, and they don't really often make inspired choices. Number 5, Kellen Moore. This is more likely to happen, I think, than a lot of people realize. Because Jerry likes things that are comfortable. He also likes things that he thinks he created. Thinks he created Kellen Moore. They drafted Kellen Moore. His first job was on their coaching staff. He's subsequently been with the Chargers and Eagles. The Eagles just had a ridiculous season of offense with Saquon Barkley, which I would say makes your job as an offensive coordinator easier. No offense to Kellen Moore. I think he's actually a really brilliant offensive mind, and it's just starting to scratch the surface of how good a coach he can be. But when you figure out, like, hey, why did Saquon leave the Giants? It's like, oh, they didn't give him the ball enough. And like, why do we give him the ball more? And then you're better. Like, sometimes the simplest answer is the best one for you, and Kellen Moore can do that. Is it inspired? Is it going to get everybody fired up? Probably not, but I actually think this is a kind of a nice choice, and Dak Prescott would be very comfortable with him because they're very close. Number 4, Dan Lanning. This is in my Shake It Up file. Go get Dan Lanning. He's a coach that's arrow is pointed up. He's a young coach. He hasn't won a national title yet, but I do think he has the vibes to be able to deal with Jerry and be in Dallas. If you're going to get a college coach, him, Marcus Freeman, don't talk to anybody else. That's who I would go with if you're going to go for the college coach. Will Jerry go for a college coach? Unlikely. I know a lot of people say Deion Sanders. I just don't think that's going to happen. I just don't think that's going to happen. Deion would like to coach his sons. He said plural. Well, there's no way the Cowboys are going to get at least one of those in Shadir Sanders. Number 3, Ben Johnson. This is the one that most of Cowboys fandom wants, and I see why. He's a brilliant offensive mind. He's great with the offensive line. You never really know where it's coming. He's big on running the ball, which the Cowboys aren't great at doing, and they need to do if Dak Prescott's their quarterback. And he's made Jared Goff the best version of himself. This is probably too good to be true for the Cowboys, but if they get him, this could be really good for Dak Prescott because the offense relies on running the ball with multiple running backs. Think about this. The Cowboys have a decent number of draft picks. They're not chock full, but you could see Ashton Genty and, say, maybe a Taj Brooks in the same backfield. Ideally, I would say Ashton Genty and Cam Skattebo, but I don't think that's going to happen. But say you could say Cam Skattebo and Devin Neal or Omarion Hampton and Taj Brooks. I mean, I can go on and on and on with the combinations that they could find to create that Sonic and Knuckles tandem that they have in Detroit with Jahmyr Gibbs and with David Montgomery. That, for me, would be huge if the Cowboys could get this exciting young coach. Do I think they will do that? I do not, but this would be a good one. Number 2, Cliff Kingsbury. There's kind of this back and forth between the Cowboys and Washington. As a matter of fact, most of the good things that happened to Washington this year happened outside of, the Jaden Daniels thing, which had nothing to do with Dallas, with them taking from Dallas. They took Dan Quinn. Then they took Dorrance Armstrong. Then they took Tyler Biotish. Then they took Dante Fowler. I can go on and on and on, but the Commanders' playoff run is filled with excellent role players from the Cowboys. Dorrance Armstrong had a sack last night, and I can't tell you how much the Cowboys miss him. He was a jack of all trades, defense, special teams. He made things happen. They miss that guy. And how do you continue this ping pong back and forth? Well, you go get their guy. And Cliff Kingsbury, Texas Tech, he's got all these Texas vibes about him. Maybe, just maybe, this could be the head coaching job that puts it all together. And the Cowboys owner and general manager is just conceited enough to think that he's the one who can pull it off with Cliff Kingsbury as the head coach. Again, I'm not really doing the best thing for the Cowboys is if they had a new general manager. That's not going to happen. But I can see this happening. Now, the number one coach who I think for what they're trying to do and who Jerry will maybe want to talk to the most is Pete Carroll. He's won a Super Bowl. This is kind of redoing the McCarthy thing again. He's won a Super Bowl. He's overwhelmingly positive. He can get in there and kind of shake things up, help Dak out a little bit. He was big on running the ball except for one time when he could have won another Super Bowl, and Marshawn Lynch and the world have never forgotten about it. But he's probably learned his lesson since then. At 1 yard line, when you've got Marshawn Lynch, run the ball. So when you get Ashton Genty at pick 12, and I'm going to speak that into existence, but he's very good at doing the simple things and making that the basis of a team and building around that. Plus, those Seattle defenses were always legit. Dan Quinn, part of that Pete Carroll tree. Well, Dan Quinn, not available, not leaving Washington. Well, if you want to pluck from the Pete Carroll tree, why don't you pluck old Pete Carroll? Since you're not going to probably go young, go old. You're not going to get Ben Johnson, get Pete Carroll. That's what I say if you're the Cowboys, and that's my top 5. Best odds as their coach and maybe best options right now. If they go well outside the box, more power to you, Jerry Jones. I hope you do. It's been a very long time of running on this hamster wheel of not winning a Super Bowl or meaningful playoff games if you're the Cowboys, and something needs to change. We're wrapping it up right now.
All right, Paul, I just went to, this called Bookies Plus. Odds on the next head coach of the Cowboys, Joe Brady, Bills offensive coordinator.
Sure. Yeah. They don't know. Like in Vegas, no, but they don't know. Jerry was not ready for this.
Deion Sanders, of course, that'll get people to bet. Kellen Moore, Bobby Slovic at Tennessee.
Houston.
I mean, that's right. Golly, Houston. And then Ben Johnson. Jason Witten is actually on this list.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Who knows? Who knows? It'll be like a weeping willow in the summertime when it starts to blow back and forth, swaying back and forth with the opportunities of what actually is true. Garrett, thank you. Emery, Craig, and Paul, thank you as always. Thanks to our great sponsors. Those of you in the chat, everybody, Charisse had a very good day today. She said she wasn't feeling well, and she left the chat earlier, a big Ohio State fan. We hope to see some of the Texas fans that we have seen throughout the year. Hopefully Paxton. I think I saw UT Parking come in at the end among C. Jenkins and others back with us tomorrow. When we come back tomorrow at 3 o'clock, tomorrow also at 1, Paul Catalina and the Triple Option. This is 365 Sports. Good night.